yetu mwenye alikuwa baba, alikuwa ndugu, alikuwa mtoto, alikuwa mzuri wote kwa sisi wote.
As a community,
kama community,
we more
tunalia
the realized potential of life taken too soon.
Na tunaangalia kama hiyo maisha yenye ilikuwa ya muhimu sana bana tukokota hiyo mbio sana.
In this difficult time,
na hii wakati yenye tunapitia shida,
we find solace in God, using this tragic to make the Congolese community visible and display our value to the world.
Na tunaangalia wakati tulisema kama Mungu anatumikisha hii juu watu wajue ya Congolese, na kwa kutuona wasikie sauti yetu na waone valeur yetu mudunia.
We celebrate the life of Patrick Lioya.
Tuna celebrate maisha ya Patrick Lioya.
He represents all Africans,
na iko na representer ba Africain bote,
and especially all the Congolese immigrants here in the United States.
Spesialima bale ba immigrant bote ba Congolais hapa mu Amerika, mu États-Unis d'Amérique.
We led a quiet life
tulikuwa naishi maisha yetu ya ukimya
of impact at this place we call home.
Na tulikuwa tunasema hii hapa ni fasi yetu.
As you can see,
gisi unaona
out there in the audience,
biko hapa bote,
we are so many.
Tuko wengi sana hapa.
To the Lioya family,
kwa Lioya, jamaa ya Lioya,
know that you are not alone.
Ujue kama amuko pekee.
We stand with you
tunashimama na nyinyi
as we seek justice for Patrick.
Na kisi tunatafuta justice juu ya Patrick.
Justice for Patrick.
Justice juu ya Patrick.
We will be remiss if we did not acknowledge the many aliens we have joined us with us during this painful season.
Na tutakuwa tunawakosea sana kama atukumbuke watu wote wenye walitusogelea mwa wakati tuko tunapitisha shida ya nguvu sana.
The Bishop McMurrin,
Bishop mchungaji McMurrin,
the Commissioner Walmart.
Na tunakuwa na Commissioner Walmart.
I used to call him my man.
Mimi najua kumuita mdongo yangu.
Our hope, Attorney Ben Crump.
Tumaini yetu Ben Crump, avoka wetu Ben Crump.
The highest level,
na tunaenda yulu,
the Reverend L. Sharpton.
Na tunaangalia mchungaji L. Sharpton.
The African diaspora
na
and the many activists
bote
from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Give them a hand.
Tupige mikono.
And around the world.
Na dunia nzima.
Thank you for standing with us and the Lioya family as we endure our son's death.
Wakati tunalia mtoto wetu
as a member of the Lioya family,
kama mambo wa Lioya wa jamaa ya Lioya,
to say thank you for all of you.
kusema asante kwa nyinyi wote.
We have no word to express our gratitude
Hatuna neno ya kusema kusema asante
for your support,
kwa sababu kwa gisi mnashimama na sisi,
for being with the family,
kushimama na jamaa,
for being with the community.
kushimama na community.
So on behalf of the Bafuliro community in America,
kwa Wafulero wote hapa Amerika,
and on behalf of the Lioya family,
na kutokea kwa jamaa Lioya,
we know that justice does not care someone's color.
na tunajua kama justice inaangalia ngozi ya mwili.
Justice does not care someone's origin.
Na justice angalie origine ya mtu.
Justice does not care someone's religion.
Na justice angalie religion ya mtu.
Justice does not care someone's belief.
Na justice angalie kuamini ya mtu.
And if that's the case,
kama ni hivyo njo iko,
then we believe
tunaamini
that true justice
ya kweli
will be done for Patrick.
Itafanyikana juu ya Patrick. Amen.
And let me tell you this,
na mimi natafuta kuambia hii,
that Patrick's blood,
damu ya Patrick,
will cry,
italalamika,
will keep crying,
italalamika
until
mpaka
true justice is done for him.
Justice ya kweli inafanyikana.
We ask you to keep supporting us.
Ninawaambia kama mnaomba tumuendeleshe kutombea.
We still need your support.
Tuko na besoin support yenu
in this tragic matter that happened to us. May the Almighty God bless you.
Mungu awabariki.
We have nothing to give you.
Hatuna kitu kingine ya kuwapea.
But remember
mkumbuke
that when a life is lost,
wakati maisha yanapotea,
it is your life,
ni maisha yako,
it is my life,
maisha yangu,
it is a human being life that is lost.
Maisha ya mwanadamu ndio inapotea.
Thank you.
Asante.
My name is Bethlehem Kongwa Shekanena.
Jina yangu naitwa Bethlehem Kongwa Shekanena.
And I have come to say that in the United States of America, the words life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are not only promised to those who live here, but to all those who come here as well. These words of hope have been the driving force that encourage many to leave all that they know.
Hii maneno ya matumaini iko nguvu yenye inakuwa nasindikiza wale wote wenye wanakuwa wanaishi hapa.
People that they know.
Watu wenye wanajua.
A country that they know.
Nchi yenye wanajua.
In order to receive America's promise.
Na ile kupata maagano tena promesa ya Amerika.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness
maisha na liberte na ile kufata uheri hapa
was a bond given to Mama na Papa Lioya.
Iko kitu yenye walipatia Mama na Papa Lioya.
Like many from Congo's Bafuliru tribe,
gisi watu wanatoka Kongo wa Fulero,
including my own family,
kupitia jamaa yangu mipekee,
Mama na Papa Lioya came to this country
Mama and Papa Lioya
with an assurance in this promise.
With
the assurance that they and their children would not be presented with turmoil and death, but with life. They came with the assurance that they and their children would not be presented with bondage and pain, but with liberty. And they came with the assurance that they and their children would not be presented with fear and sorrow, but with happiness. They came to America with hope and assurance in this country's promise. But life, liberty, and the ability to pursue happiness is not what was given. We are gathered here today
tuko hapa leo
because the promise given to all those who reside on this land,
ile promesa yenye walipatia watu wote wenye naishi ndani ya nchi,
the very foundation of what makes America America,
ile msingi yenye ilifanya Amerika inakuwa Amerika,
it was broken the moment Patrick Lyoya was killed in the street.
Ilivunjwa wakati Patrick walimupiga masasi na alikufa.
He was a brother.
Alikuwa ndugu.
He was a son.
Alikuwa mtoto.
He was a friend.
Alikuwa rafiki.
He was a hard-working American.
Na alikuwa anatumika sana.
And he was a proud Congolese man who cared for his family, who cared for those around him, and who cared for everyone that he came in contact with.
Alikuwa Kongole mwenye alikuwa fiere na alikuwa anatumainia, alikuwa anashika familia yake mumikono na mtu wote mwenye pembeni yake.
But most importantly, he was a human being.
Na kwa yote alikuwa mwanadamu.
He did not deserve to die, wrongfully murdered in the streets.
Na walimupiga masasi kwa kibaya.
Patrick, mana wetu, you should be here with us
today. Kuwa leo na sisi.
You had so much to offer the world.
Ulikuwa na mingi ya kupatia dunia.
And we failed you.
Specifically,
it failed you.
Na hii system ilikuangusha.
And I am so sorry that it failed you.
Na mimi najua na lomba nasikia huzuni sana kama haikuresir.
You left us early, Patrick.
Ulitoka hapa dunia mbio sana.
And we were not able to say goodbye.
Na tukusema kwaheri.
That it's not your fault.
Hii haiko makosa yako.
But you are still gone nonetheless.
Na unaenda.
Please know that we will forever love and we will forever miss you.
Na unajua ujue kama tutaendelea na kukupenda na tutakuwa na kukumbuka.
That we will be strong for you.
Na tutakuwa nguvu juu yako.
That we will fight for you.
Na tutapigana juu yako.
Please rest easy. Rest in peace.
Upumzike, upumzike, upumzike. Asante.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan, and this is my brother Amani. We made a song for my brother Patrick. Patrick was more than brother to me. I remember the Saturday before he passed away, we were at my friend's birthday party, and he saw me from far. He came, and he hugged me very tight. And he was so excited. He told me, Jonathan, I just got a new place. You should come to my house. We should have a dinner. And I was like, okay, all right, good. When we leave here, send me the address and I'll come and see you. And then from there, we left. Monday morning, I heard that he passed away. I'm really... I'm really broken. So I made a song for him.
Ilikuwa kama ndoto asubuhi na mapema, tumepata taarifa kuwa Patrick hayupo tena duniani. Tulifikiri ni utani, kumbe Patrick hayupo tena. Pengo lako nani mwingine taliziba moyo nani kuma. Wema uliyotufanyia, mazuri uliyotutendea, kamwe hatutokuja saulika. Kaka nienda salama. Nakumbuka Jumamosi kabla kifo yako uliniambia nije nikuone. Kumbe ulikuwa nani aga Patrick, moyo mimi unaniuma. Najiuliza mama yako mzazi sijui yako kwenye hali gani. Maana najua uchungu wa mwana au jua ni mama Tumetoka mavumbini na tutarudi mavumbini. Bwana ametoa na Bwana ametoa. Jina lake libarikiwe. Amen.
À chaque fois lorsque je vois tes photos sur les réseaux sociaux, j'impose à mon cœur de ne pas croire que tu es parti. Tu avais des rêves, tu avais des ambitions. Pour te plairont, y'a solo. Bato mitema boboto ba umela kate na sena moi. Likamwango esalinga pasi na motema. Na mama bazolela, bajene tozolela, na bana bazolela. Communauté congolaise ezolelela yo, esali biso pasi na mitema. Unatuacha na huzuni, Patrick nenda salama, tutakukumbuka sana. Mola kula zema lipe mapeponi, amina. Nenda salama, salama salama, tutakukumbuka daima. Nenda salama.
Rest in peace, Patrick Lioya. We love you.
Le zoo, le zoo. Le zoo. Come on.
Patrick. Patrick.
Patrick.
Ah yes.
Dans mon pays, quand tu as un enfant,
in our country, when you have a son,
tu es en train d'investir dans les enfants.
You invest in the children.
Parce que c'est ça aussi ta retraite.
Because that is how you can get also, you can retreat.
Parce que quand tu seras vieux, c'est l'enfant qui va te supporter.
Because when you will become older, it's your son that is going to take care of you.
Patrick, tu es parti.
Patrick, you are gone.
Qu'est-ce que je veux faire, moi, ton père?
What am I going to do? Me, your father.
Qui va m'enterrer? Qui me prendra en charge?
Who else is going to take me in charge?
qui va me supporter quand je serai vieux.
Who is going to support me when I will be old? I will become old.
Nanga na belema na belema na yo na belema na yo na belema na yo Nzambe nanga.
Oui, il n'y a que Dieu qui peut tout.
It's only God who can do everything.
Hallelujah.
Who is able to do everything.
Kitsiona. Hallelujah.
I wanna condolo ya kadiba pambazile. Condolo ya kadiba pambazile. Kitona. Ya mune. Ya mune.
Ya mune. Nous follow Candilune. Ya mune. Nous follow Candilune.
I'm gonna miss you forever. I'm gonna miss you, Patrick. I'm gonna miss you. Kitana.
You just heard from the Congolese community, and what they're saying, Tuambwama, means that be lifted, be glorified, because you are the only one who deserves the praise, you deserve the worship, and you deserve the glory. That's what they mean. Thank you.
Let's give them another great God bless you. My brothers and sisters from everywhere, the spark that united this movement, the catalyst that has us all together here. Let us stand and receive Commissioner Robert S.
Womack.
Justice for Patrick.
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 Thank you very much.
Asante sana.
I'd like to acknowledge President Cliff Jackson of the NAACP.
Natafuta kusema asante kwa President Cliff Jackson.
Eric Brown, President of the Urban League.
Eric Brown, President of the Urban League.
I'd like to have all our elected officials stand up.
Na wote watu waongozi wetu wa mwananchi washimame. Na wanakuja leo hapa kutusiporte leo. Hawa ni waongozi wetu.
My immigration attorney Hillary Scoden, please stand.
Nasema avoka wangu wa immigration Hilary Shimama.
And all our clergy
na hawa pastere wote
denominations.
Watumishi wa Mungu wote, watumishi wa Mungu wote.
Bishop McMurray not only for opening up his church,
Bishop McMurray akufungula tu kanisa,
but all the work he's been doing the last 14 days.
Alikuwa anafanya hii 14 jours natoka kupita,
to make sure this young man
fanya yote huyu jamaa
who is worthy
mwenye maisha yake
of a celebration of life
wangemcelebrate maisha yake yote,
has some place to have his celebration of life.
Celebrate maisha yake.
I would like the family to stand up.
Nataka jamaa yote shimame.
Could the family please stand up?
Jamaa mshimame.
Because this is what it's all about, this family.
Tuko hapa ni juu ya jamaa yake muwashangilie.
And I want 30 seconds.
Mimi nataka muwashangilie 30 seconds.
Applause.
Wapige mikono
for this family. Let's go.
Kwa jamaa, pige mikono, pige mikono, pige mikono. Pige mikono, pige mikono, pige mikono.
I want the family can sit. I just wanted you to know how much we love you and support you. Let's give it up one more time for Ben Crump and Al Sharpton. They made sure that the world would know about this tragedy in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And as Reverend Sharpton said, and as Ben Crump said, this is bigger than Grand Rapids. This is how over-policing in African American communities in the United States of America has led to death from sea to shiny sea.
Njoo iko naonesha gisi wa polisie mwetazini wiko na watu weusi.
In Grand Rapids we have to play our part now.
Mu Grand Rapids na sisi tunapaswa kufanya yetu.
We can't have our leadership just come out because Al Sharpton's in the house. We can't have our leadership come out just because Ben Crump's in the house. We need them on the front line like our protesters have been on the front line every day. Every day. This didn't happen just overnight. We saw it coming for years. People went to City Hall and they said it's coming. We just didn't know what family was going to take that blow. The Lioya family has had to pay the price for the lack of proactiveness in the city of Grand Rapids when it comes to GRPD and the black community. As I close, I would like to thank every single person in this room for being here today. As I look around this room and all the people that came to celebrate the life of Patrick Lioya and his family, I understand that it was God's plan to bring this multitude of leadership, activists, protesters, and neighbors together at this time to support Patrick Lioya and his family. This is God's plan. For with God all things are possible. And if he gave his only begotten son to die for us, if he made that sacrifice, he will continue to do things to show us life is bigger than money. Life is bigger than car rims. Life is bigger than gold ropes. God brought us all together to join in this calamity, to join in this fight, to help save humanity from humanity. The life of Patrick Lioya has filled this room today with blacks and whites and people of all races, ethnic backgrounds, who believe in righteousness and peace. To all the true believers who are here today, as you leave, do not say that you went to a funeral today. Say that you went to a celebration of life for Patrick Lioya. Do not say that you went to a funeral today. Say that you went to a place to love and support the Lioya family. Do not say that you went to a funeral today. Say I went to a house upon all. Today can be a new milestone for justice and peace and change. Today can be an opportunity to show the entire world
Good evening, everyone. I am Robert J. Conti III, Chief of Police here in Washington, D.C. of the Metropolitan Police Department. I'm joined by the Mayor of the District of Columbia, the Honorable Mayor Muriel Bowser, as well as several of our partners from area law enforcement agencies. I want to give you an update on the incident, the shooting that we had here on Connecticut Avenue earlier today, just after 3 o'clock p.m. Today, evil reared its ugly head in our community. People were unnecessarily shot in our community as a result of a senseless act of violence. So far, I can report to you that the victims, we have 4 victims, and those victims are being treated at area hospitals. 3 of those 4 victims are being treated at area hospitals. The suspect that we believe is responsible for this is now deceased. We believe that the suspect took his own life as MPD members were entering or breaching the apartment where the suspect was located. I am unable to confirm the identity of the suspect at this time, pending official notification to the family. But I will say that we put out a person of interest earlier, and we are no longer looking for that person of interest. I will also tell you that one of the individuals who was shot, the male who was shot, is a retired member of the Metropolitan Police Department. There's one juvenile child that was shot, and then the other 2 are adult females that were shot. I want to thank the members of our law enforcement community, our federal partners from the ATF, FBI, U.S. Secret Service, United States Park Police, UDC Police, the entire resource, the entire law enforcement resource of the District of Columbia collaborated tonight to ensure the safety of this community. I can report to the community that we will be breaking down this perimeter so that residents will be able to get back home. All of the children that were in the schools that sheltered in place are safe and being reunited. With most of them have been reunited with their families. We probably have one kid that we're just waiting on a family member, but all of the children have been reunited with their family members. So we're very thankful that no more of our children were injured tonight. I can also tell you that inside of the suspect's apartment, we've recovered over 6 firearms, to include several long guns, multiple rounds of ammunition, and handguns as well. This investigation is ongoing. As we work with our partners, our federal partners from the FBI, ATF, and all the other partners that I mentioned, we will get to the bottom of this. We will find out what the motive is. And right now, we do not have that answer. But the answer that we do have is that our communities are now safe. And they are safe because of the swift work of police officers who were very methodical in their efforts to ensure the safety and security of our children and to ensure the safety and security of the residents and visitors here to the District of Columbia. That will conclude the formal statement. And if you have any questions, I can take a few questions to talk about what else we can share at this point.
Did the individual who killed himself have a connection to the Edmund Burke School, and did he obtain the weapons legally, as far as you know?
As far as I know, we're not sure if he had a connection to the Edmund Burke School, and it appears that the weapons that he has, based on some preliminary information, that they may have been obtained legally. Next question.
Chief, Casey Nolan, WUSA 9. What can you say about this video we've seen? Did he stream this act live?
We don't know if it was streamed live or if it was recorded and then posted. That's part of our investigation, and we just don't know the answer to that right now. Yes, sir, you here.
Eric Bellis from CNN. We heard reports of a tripod in the window of the man's apartment facing towards where he was shooting. When MPD went into his apartment, did they find evidence of a tripod or anything pointing out of a window?
I can confirm that. This was very much a sniper-type setup with a tripod, and this person, obviously his intent was to kill and hurt members of our community.
Chief, was he the only shooter involved in this situation, or were there more?
We do not believe there are any other shooters. We believe that this is the shooter. The members of the Metropolitan Police Department responded very quickly, and based upon collaboration with community members, they were able to isolate the location where the shooting was coming from, the 5th floor of this particular apartment building. So they were able to lock that down and ultimately, again, breach the location where the suspect took his life. Next question. Clarence, I'm sorry. Is there another question over here? They were going about their business. They were on the streets of the District of Columbia when they were shot. Next question. Yes.
Connect the victims at all in any way? Does it appear that he was shooting them at random? Is any pattern or anything that you
It just appears that this person was just shooting randomly at anyone who was out there. It's unfortunate. It speaks to the depravity of some of the individuals that we have to face in our communities. But again, I am so thankful for the collaboration with community members, for community members who had a swift eye to what was going on, who alerted their law enforcement officers, who were able to respond very quickly to that location, to that floor, isolate that location, extract residents safely from the building, shelter the children in place in the school, send police officers there to the school to assist in comforting those kids, and ultimately getting the kids out of the line of fire to a secondary location where they could be successfully reunited with their parents. That's really if there's anything that's good that comes out of this, is that not more people than what were hurt ended up being hurt, because there could have been a lot of damage done tonight, more damage done, and lives lost as a result of what this gunman did tonight. Any other questions? I'll take one or two more. Yes, sir.
That video that's circulating on social media, you can confirm that is the video, at least images of the shooting, and if it is, what role did that play, if any, in locating this suspect?
It appears that it is the video. Obviously, as we go through forensically and do our examination, we'll be able to make that determination for certain. Certainly, if you've seen it, I've seen it. It looks very much to be authentic, but we want to just make sure of that. And I would say that it was also very helpful in us in terms of making sure that we were focused in on the right place. Yes, sir. The gentleman in the back with his hand up.
I love Mel Bowser. She's the best. Thank you, baby.
Well, and
Can you tell us what floor the suspect's apartment was on? What floor?
On the 5th floor. Yes. One last question. Any other questions?
Chief,
I'm sorry, I can't see. Where are you? Okay.
You're right here,
yes.
Sir. Were any of the victims inside the school?
No, the victims did not. Someone may have ended up in the school, but there were not shots that were fired that ended up striking someone that was inside the school. At least that's my understanding right now. Again, this has been a very fluid situation, as you all can imagine. To have an incident of this magnitude to occur right here in one of the busiest corridors of our city. Things have been unfolding. Information has been coming in very rapidly, and we're just, again, sifting through everything to make sure that we have all of our T's crossed, all of our I's dotted, and we really get to the bottom of what the motive was behind this. I can't express enough. I just think that it speaks to the depravity of some of the individuals that we deal with out here. Someone who would do something like this, I really don't really have a lot of words for it. But again, I'm glad that that person is no longer a threat to the citizens of the District of Columbia.
1, 2, 3.
Well, Chief, you used the word sniper. This is a city that knows what it's like to have a sniper on the loose 20 years ago or so.
Yes, sir.
Just put that in some context for us, what you were dealing with as you were trying to track him down tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very tense situation. I mean, you don't know what you don't know in that situation. I mean, we all, recall, back in that time when we had the DC sniper situation unfolding. Unfortunately, that situation unfolded over the course of several days. This incident was over and resolved in a matter of a few hours.
Yeah, does this person of interest or suspect, has MPD or any law enforcement had engagement with him in the past? Does he have any kind of criminal record that you know about?
Not that I can tell so far. Of what I've been preliminarily told, no. Yes, sir.
Chief, can you tell us a bit more, this idea he was shooting from a sniper's nest, how wide an area was he spraying, and can you give us some sense of how many shots did he fire? We heard witnesses saying as many from 20 to 80. How many rounds were fired? How, it's a widespread area, or was it targeted around a single block or a courtyard or an alley? Can you describe the kind of the fire?
I can't get that specific. I can tell you he was shooting from north to south, and there were multiple rounds. I would say definitely in excess of 20 rounds. I don't know what the specific number was, but he certainly fired a lot of rounds. Obviously, this is an inside scene. We're securing a search warrant for the location, but we'll have to methodically go through, count the number of rounds that were fired from the weapon to really kind of give you a better estimate on what those numbers are. But right now, I don't have that specific information.
Is there any chance he fired more than one weapon? I mean,
that's very possible. Absolutely very possible that he fired more than one weapon. All right.
Chief, those shots at those the shops down the street here, a block and a half, Does that fit into this, or is that just some weird coincidence?
No, we think that's based upon the weaponry that I've seen that's inside of this location, that it is very probable that is one of the rounds that was fired from this location here. Okay, well, I want to thank the citizens of the District of Columbia for their patience tonight, especially those who were not able to get access to their homes, to the family members who had children in school. Thank you for your patience with us tonight to bring about a resolve to this very unfortunate situation. Good night.
Welcome back, everyone, here to Live Now from Fox as we continue to roll on and giving you the top stories and headlines from all over the country. It is Friday. I'm your host, Mike Page. Thanks so much for joining us here today. Obviously, for the last 50-plus days, we've been giving you updates on the war there in Ukraine that continues to rage on, and we've been giving updates and talking to people that are living right there in Ukraine and getting the latest updates. And our friend here on Live Now from Fox, Mark Savchek, joining us once again. Mark, always great to see you, and I'm glad that we're able to talk again right now. And it's been a little bit since we talked, so why don't you just give us the latest on what you are seeing there in Kyiv?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. So I think the last time we were talking together, Russian forces were still near Kyiv. And I have been saying that eventually a Ukrainian army will be able to stop them, which is exactly what happened. And now there is fierce fighting in the southeast. Russian forces have retreated from Kyiv, Chernihiv, and Sumy, and are now concentrated on the southeastern part of Ukraine and are storming Mariupol, my home city. So basically, as I've been saying, that Ukraine has been able to stop the Russian army, and now it's a very fierce battle in the southeast. And the only question really right now is the supply of weapons from the west to Ukraine, because what we have seen obviously demonstrates that Ukrainian army is much better prepared than the Russian army, has a much higher morale and much higher skill than the Russian army. The problem is the size of the army. We don't have the same amount of tanks, aircrafts, anti-air, artillery, multiple rocket launch systems, etc. Russia is simply too big. It spends, I think, about like 20 times what we spend on the military, and it is also has the it inherited the Cold War tanks, armor, artillery, etc., which is it now using in the East. And basically, Ukraine is saying to the West, look, guys, if you give us the weapons, we will be able to take them out. So this is the situation right now.
That's so true, Mark, because look at what you guys were able to accomplish just on your very own. And then with this other aid packages that continue to come, we just heard President Biden yesterday announce more weapons that will be coming to help the Ukrainians. But look at what you've done on your, it's amazing, because when we were talking, they were surrounding Kyiv, and you said, you guys are going to hold it down. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, you should listen to us.
Oh, we do, yeah. And you know what does this, when you see, okay, more weapons and artillery are coming to your aid, what does that do as far as bolstering, not only, of course, you're going to have the machinery, of course, you're going to have the weapons now, but what does that do to morale as well?
It is certainly good, because we see that our allies support us. But actually, I wanted to stress another point. You see, it is quite controversial right now, because you clearly see that the West is finally coming together to supply heavy weapons to Ukraine. But it's so difficult to say, but we need more. I know it's surprising, but the matter of fact is, look at the amount we have destroyed in the past 2 months. We have destroyed more than 800 tanks. We have destroyed more than 2,100 armored personnel carriers. We have destroyed, I think it's over 320 helicopters and aircrafts. Now, what I'm saying right now is basically the amount Germany, United Kingdom, and France has altogether. And we have been able to destroy that in 60 days. And believe me, Russians have more. So despite the help from the West, which is big, I'm not saying the West doesn't do anything, it does. But we just need more, because simply their army is so huge. And we actually ran into a problem. Right now, Ukraine basically ran out of supplies. So we have the machinery, but for example, we really have a huge deficit of artillery shells, the 152 millimeter shells. Our guns are basically half silent, because we simply can't fire them all the time, because we don't have the shells. So the situation is actually, despite the help from the West, it's coming, how shall I put it, too slowly. We just need more. Finally, literally yesterday, we have heard from Biden administration that they're sending another package of 78 artillery pieces, 155 millimeters. That is amazing. Now we hear that France is going to send us self-propelled artillery, which is amazing. But this is what we really needed like 2 weeks ago. Of course, we are super grateful it's coming, and finally, when it will be able to arrive, we will be able to push these guys back. But it's very difficult to convey this message. But because Russian army is so huge, we ran out of supplies, and we need additional help. And we think it's sort of a fair ask to ask this from the West, because we are destroying the Russian army. If you help us, if you give us more weapons, we will effectively kill everything and anything that Russia can throw into a fight. And because they will bleed out on our army, they will have absolutely nothing left for Europe. Because as you know, as you've seen from the state's TV, from Russian state TV, they openly say that they have ambitions to conquer the rest of the Europe. They actually say that out loud. And so what we ask from the West to send more weapons, multiple launch rocket systems, and long-range artillery is actually a good deal for the West, because by using these weapons, we will be able to completely demolish his forces, and he will have nothing left.
So true, and I feel you when you're talking about that, that Washington D.C. red tape that we all know here in the States of, and unfortunately you're seeing that play out in real time. But for a lot of red tape in government here, it goes to the way of just small talk. But for Ukraine, it's much different, because this is literally, guys, life and death. And you know this so well. And what do you think it's going to take? I'm going to say this. This might be an unpopular opinion in the media-wise, but what is it going to really take for NATO to step up? And we see the images. We're seeing the travesties that are playing out, how just ruthless and barbaric Russia is in what they're doing to Ukrainians. This is genocide. So when is it going to be stepped up and get involved? What is it going to take? How many graves have to be dug up?
Okay, I actually have an answer for that question. The first very big point to the American people, and actually to the West, is that Ukraine doesn't ask for military to directly be involved, for the Western military. For NATO or the US, we don't need that. We have our own military. As you can see, it is one of the most qualified militaries in the world right now, but we just simply ran out of supplies. So we will be able to finally take them on and completely destroy them on our own. We just need the hardware. So basically artillery, tanks, multiple rocket launch systems, long-range rockets, mortars, armored personnel carriers, armored vehicles, 4x4s. Yes, we will need a lot for sure, because we're destroying such a huge army, which is the Russian army, but we will be able to do that. Now, that's point number one. We're not asking any foreign military to actually take part in this war. We will be able to do that. We just need more resources. The next question is, we will need, unfortunately, more financial aid, because literally more than 25% of my country has been displaced. A lot of the GDP of Ukraine has been completely and irreversibly destroyed. That means, of course, that Ukraine will need financial assistance in order to support itself. We have like 10 million people unemployed right now, which is, logical. They have to leave their homes. Kharkiv is destroyed. Chernihiv is destroyed. Sumy is destroyed. Mariupol is completely wiped out. You have seen images from Mariupol. This town, this city, which was home for 500,000 people, is completely destroyed, and all the GDP in there as well. So we will need, second point is we will need financial aid. And the third point, Europe and the West will have to eventually impose a ban on oil and gas from Russia. And I'll explain why. Because in the first 50 days of war, Russia received $40 billion revenue from exporting oil and gas. Look, it's impossible for Ukraine to defeat an enemy if it's been supplied with, loads of money from the West. Yes, of course, it's trade. I understand that. And it will take time to completely ban Russian oil and gas. Again, I understand that. But it's impossible to send $1 billion of military aid to Ukraine and $1 billion to Ukraine in financial aid, and then pay $40 billion for oil and gas in Russia. We will simply not be able to win. He will have too much money. He will eventually be able to completely push his war machine into overdrive and simply run through, eventually throw so much resources at us that Ukraine will eventually be destroyed by cruise missiles and all the rest of it. So all these three components have to play together in order for us to completely destroy Russian forces. So it's additional hardware and ammo. It's additional financial aid to Ukraine because, unfortunately, we have to support all the millions of people who have been displaced due to war. And finally, Europe will have to impose complete sanctions on oil and gas. Now, what will happen once that is in place? First, Russian economy will collapse in about half a year's time. There will simply be not enough money to pay the pensions, to pay the unemployment benefits, to pay for the police and FSB to keep the whole country at bay, and to finance the war. He will have to choose. Putin will have to choose eventually where he wants to put his money in. As long as he has revenues from oil and gas, he doesn't have to choose. He will be able to sustain his economy. And by giving additional help of military and financial aid to Ukraine, you will sustain basically our war machine. And as we have already shown in the past 60 days, we can beat them. We can beat them. Anything they throw at us, we can deal with this. So eventually, if all these three streams of support for Ukraine will be working, in about half a year time, you will simply see his forces run dry. He will bleed out, basically, and he will be pushed onto the negotiation tables. It will be inevitable.
Yeah, you're showing it day in and day out. There's no doubt that you can beat them and continue to do so. But Mark, as we, we're 50 plus days into this. How are you doing just as a person? I mean, I can't imagine what it's like on a day-on-day basis of living through this. But I mean, how are you as a person right now?
Okay, again, I'll be able to explain that. I would be actually much worse if I weren't directly involved into this. Believe me, when your day starts and ends with you trying to do the best for your country and you're directly involved in this conflict, it is easier to bear through this because I understand that everything I do in my work is directly affecting on what's happening. So I'm basically doing some media work for the General Command, and we are quite successful at what we are doing. And so when you put a lot of effort and you see the fruits of this effort, it sort of becomes easier, to bear through this. And actually, this is, what I'm trying to say. If you're actively involved in this, it's easier to go through this. It's much harder when the person just sits there alone, doesn't know what to do, he's frightened. But I know what I'm doing. I know what my work, how is affecting the conflict. And how shall I put it? It's not so difficult. So we are fighting for our future. So, and seeing the unity of my country, how the whole country is completely united, it's also, very uplifting to see millions and millions of people working day and night to do their best to supply our army, to fundraise the money. I have told you that, that we're like buying tactical gear from all over the world. And despite our economy is in the ruins, we are still able to basically sustain our army. And obviously, I don't mean in terms of weapons and stuff. I mean in terms of like personal aid kits, tactical glasses and stuff like that. There are literally tens of thousands of people who went into the army since 24th of February, and we are able to supply them, and they basically look as NATO soldiers. Which is, great because our economy has shrunk by 35%, even more now, I think will be by the end of the year. And we're still managing to supply them to sort of like NATO standards. It's amazing. And so I'm all right because like we're putting so much effort into this war. And we see that our army is very successful against the Russian forces. Actually, the only limiting factor is the armor and the weapons. So I'm okay because I work a lot and I see fruits of that labor, and I'm surrounded by the wonderful people who want their country to be, much better, much stronger after this war.
Well, Mark, it's totally motivational just hearing about you, and just you're keeping busy, you're keeping focused, and more importantly, you're telling the story of Ukrainians and how they are going against. I mean, this is, you know, they were talking about this is David versus Goliath, right? But I think a lot of people, you know, I think a lot of people see it as, well, Goliath got exposed real quick, didn't he?
Absolutely, and
actually, a lot of Ukrainians are all Davids, and boy, they're coming through like nothing, right?
Absolutely. I think our president went on to the digital campaign called sort of like a bravery, showing the bravery of our people. And yeah, look, it's actually, it's not difficult to understand. The truth is on our side. Yeah, this war that Putin has started is based on nothing, based on lies. They say that, you know, we have been Ukraine have been oppressing Russian-speaking population in the East. Well, hello, I'm Russian-speaking population in the East. Nobody has ever oppressed me, and I speak Russian still to this day. Nothing happened. Half of our army speaks Russian, for goodness sake. So this war is based completely on lies. So our people is very united against this evil, and his forces are all corrupt. You can clearly see that Russian army is not as strong as it marketed itself, because it's completely corrupt from the inside out. It's completely rotten. It's just the problem is that this army is so huge, and it will literally take time to completely destroy what they have brought into Ukraine. But we will get there. And yes, this Goliath has been exposed incredibly fast, and that's actually what I'm saying. If you want to stop the war as soon as possible, you need to do three things. You need to give Ukraine more heavy weapons. You need to give Ukraine financial aid so it can keep on fighting, and you need to impose more sanctions on Russia, and the war will stop this year. But these three things have to play together in order for us to finish the fight.
And I'm praying for that, Mark. I'm praying for you and your family and friends. That I hope you know, when we talk the next time, we're talking about something much better, and maybe a light at the end of that tunnel there, Mark. But Mark, thank you so much for joining us and really giving us insight and really, you know, motivation. I tell people, you know, you think you have it hard, think about what's going on over there, and you know, it's much harder. But you do it with a smile, you do it with grace, and you're keeping focus. So we appreciate you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem, man.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. Earth Day. Come on. There you go, baby. I think hopefully you saw today we announced the Secretary's Environmental Award winners for 2022. We recognize installation teams and individuals for their accomplishments and innovative and cost-effective environmental management strategies, which support critical mission readiness here at the department. These achievements by the nominees include significant strides to conserve our nation's natural and cultural resources, protect human health, prevent or eliminate pollution at the source, clean up hazardous substances, pollutants or contaminants, and munitions on DoD sites, and of course incorporate environmental requirements into weapons system acquisition. We want to continue to leverage technology to develop innovative solutions to existing and emerging human health and environmental challenges. So I think we put that press release up on defense.gov and certainly point you to that. So with that, we'll go to questions. Bob.
Yes, thank you. A couple quick things. Do you have any update on the Ramstein meeting next week as far as attendees or anything else, any other details?
Yeah, we're about 40 or so other nations were invited to attend. Invitations are still, RSVPs are still coming in, but I can tell you that more than 20 of the invited nations have agreed to come. So we're looking forward to that meeting, and we'll, as we get closer to it, we'll certainly have more detail about it.
Will that be connected to any kind of a NATO activity, like where he's going to go brief NATO on?
No. This is outside of the NATO rubric, and not all the nations that were invited are NATO members. As you know, NATO as an alliance is not providing security assistance to Ukraine, so this is not being done under the NATO umbrella at all. Now, some of the nations invited and some of the nations that will be going are, in fact, NATO allies, but they're doing this in a sovereign, unilateral way, not as a part of the alliance.
Separate question on Ukraine. A number of House members have written to the Secretary asking that the military provide field hospitals and other kinds of medical assistance for civilian casualties in Ukraine, possibly including armored ambulances that provided to the Ukrainians. Is the Pentagon working on any of that sort of thing?
No, I think we're just now in receipt of the letter. There's, I have no plans to speak to regarding that. We'll obviously will digest the letter from these members of Congress, certainly take it seriously and respond appropriately, but I don't have any plans to speak to at this time. You know, we do still have members of the 82nd Airborne in Poland. There has not been a massive need for them in terms of helping American refugees, but that's obviously, if there would be additional support that we could provide for humanitarian assistance, it would be something that we would do absolutely in lockstep with the Polish government. I mean, it's their country, so we'd want to be talking to the host nation about what they thought the needs would be, and make sure that whatever we're doing is in support of what they're doing to support so many refugees.
So it hasn't been yet considered or ruled out, or
there's no planning going on at the Pentagon right now to set up field hospitals. Again, we'll take seriously the suggestions and the recommendations by members of Congress on everything. We always do. But whatever you do inside Poland or any other NATO country right now on the eastern flank, you have to do it in full consultation with the host government. It has to be, a need that they too believe the United States military can fill. When you look at everything we're doing on the eastern flank, whether it's air policing or maritime domain awareness or additional air defense capabilities, everything we've done since before the invasion has been in keeping with whatever those host nations desire in terms of additional capabilities. And so if it's a desire by the Polish government for additional U.S. support for humanitarian purposes, obviously we would take that very seriously. Yeah. Tara.
Thanks, John. President Zelensky earlier today said that his country will need at least $7 billion a month, likely more, just in operations costs and getting support for global support to keep.
Yeah, I don't think he was limiting that just to defense.
Right. In this long-term meeting planning that's going to go on next week, can you talk through the scope of things that are being looked at? Would this be fundraising or, being able to pay for Ukraine's interior defense, their police forces, or would it be to pay the roles of their troops? What's kind of the universe of things that's being looked at?
Yeah, I mean, I would refer you to Mr. Zelensky to talk about where he got that number and what he would want to use that figure for. I think he laid it out that it was a broad range of aid that they were looking for, not just in terms of defense. So I can't give you a laundry list of what $7 billion would go for, because it's an idea that Mr. Zelensky has proffered. I would just tell you that from a defense perspective, as you know, we continue to get them as much aid and material and weapons as we can, as fast as we can. That's happening even as we speak. And one of the things the Secretary wants to come out of Tuesday in Ramstein is the beginnings of a discussion with like-minded nations about long-term defense relationships that Ukraine will need going forward. Obviously, we want to talk about what's going on now. We certainly want to hear from from Ukraine and from other nations about what they're doing in terms of immediate defense assistance and how that might change as the fighting there changes. But I think he also wants to take a larger view of the defense relationships that Ukraine will need to have going forward when the war is over. And so well, we don't know. That's why we want to have the meeting. We don't know. He's not going into this meeting on Tuesday, with a preset list of things that he thinks we have to drive to. He wants to hear from allies and partners and from the Ukrainians themselves about what they're doing and what they will need going forward. That's why we're calling it a consultative group, so we can actually consult. But we're not going into this with a pre-cooked set of endings here.
And just one last, earlier this week, you talked about that some nation was sending aircraft to Ukraine, and then clarified that it was parts that had moved in so far. Where does that stand now? Has Ukraine actually received aircraft from any other nations?
I'm not aware that they've received whole operable aircraft from any nation at this time. Kelly?
I have one other, but I was going to follow up on Bob's first question about the letter from members of Congress. They also asked about providing Ukraine with armored ambulances, as well as taking some of the sick and wounded to the U.S. military Langstall Regional Hospital in Western Germany. Are those other options?
Again, I have no planning to speak to with respect to field medical assistance inside Poland. We will continue to talk to the Poles about how and whether American troops in Poland can be useful in other ways than they already are. And we're certainly open to having those discussions, but I don't have anything more specific on this letter to talk to today.
And then just wanted to ask you on the reports of the up to 10 sailors who have died on the USS George Washington, some by apparent suicide. Can you explain in any way why there appears to be a cluster of suicides off one dock ship, and some members of Congress say the military isn't doing enough to stop these deaths? So is the department trying to do
Well, I'm not going to get ahead of the Navy and their investigative efforts on these deaths aboard the USS George Washington. I'd refer you to the Navy to speak to what they're learning, if they can even share that with you right now. Stepping back a little bit, as we talked about yesterday, suicide is a significant concern inside the department. It certainly is a concern for Secretary Austin. You've heard him say many times that mental health is health, period, and that's how he wants the department to look at this. And obviously, we wouldn't have stood up this independent review commission for suicide prevention if we didn't really believe that we've got more work to do. Clearly, we have more work to do. And we know that. And this is a very complex problem, and there's not going to be one single solution that can fix it all. And that's the other thing that we're learning in talking to experts outside the lifelines lifelines of the department, that you have to be a little humble going into this. So we've got this IRC stood up. We're looking forward to getting it manned and actually populated with experts, and then we'll continue to move out on that.
Could there be more deaths? Or you're watching the investigation take place? Could there be more deaths on the ship?
I mean, I don't know how anybody could answer that question. I don't know. I mean, we obviously don't want there to be. Of course not. Regardless of how these sailors have died, no, we don't want to see any sailor harmed or hurt or lose their life, period, regardless of what the cause is. But I can tell you that the Navy's taken this very seriously. Navy leadership has taken this very seriously, and they're looking at what has happened on the George Washington and trying to better understand it. And I know that they, again, I'm not going to get ahead of their investigation, but I know that they're taking the issue of these losses on the GW very, very seriously. Yeah. Anybody over here? Yeah.
Mike Stone from Reuters.
Are you sure?
Are you?
I'm sure now.
So let's talk about money for a second. The government has $3.5 billion earmarked for replenishing U.S. stocks that have gone to Ukraine. Where are we barometrically on burning through that, number one? And then second, Presidential Drawdown Authority, the president said yesterday he's almost out of it. What's the magnitude being contemplated for the next ask for Presidential Drawdown Authority?
I'm not going to get ahead of decisions that haven't been made, Mike from Reuters. But we are, as the president said, we are reaching near the end of current authorities, and we've also made very clear that we'd be willing and interested in having a discussion with Congress moving forward should there be the need for more. I mean, we're going to continue to support Ukraine as best we can, as fast as we can. I don't have any additional contracting information to give you on the $300 million right now. The only contracts that have been put out of that are the Puma UAVs, but we're working very hard, as I said yesterday, to get the other ones actuated. Okay. Yeah.
John, a fire at a Russian military research facility killed 6 people and injured dozens of others. Do we know what Russia might have been doing at that facility and what could have caused that fire?
I don't, and I don't have any updates on the actual fire itself. No. Laura? Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I just wanted to get a little more clarity on this Phoenix Ghost drone from yesterday. Can you tell us specifically, is this drone that's going to Ukraine, has it been tailored for the Ukraine fight? And did the Pentagon accelerate the development of this drone for Ukraine?
It was already under development by the U.S. Air Force, and the kinds of capabilities that we were developing it for happened to be very appropriate to the kind of fighting that we anticipate is going to go on in the Donbass region. And so it was again under development, but well suited to what Ukraine's requirements are now. As we talk to the Ukrainians and they tell us, here's what we really need for what we think the Russians are going to do, and the kind of terrain and the kind of capabilities we want our units to have. We realized that in this particular system, we could meet some of those needs. And again, I'm not going to get into the details and the specifications of it, but it was already under development. Capabilities are already being conceived by the Air Force and the contractor as we were working on this, and we realized that it absolutely fit very well the kinds of needs, some of the needs, not all, some of the needs that the Ukrainians had.
Well, was it accelerated? Was it pulled forward for this fight?
It wasn't pulled forward for the fight, but we are going to work hard. The development, the capabilities have not been pulled forward because of this. particular fight. We haven't adapted that, but we are certainly going to move very quickly to get them the 121 that were authorized in this latest package. I mean, so we're going to accelerate the delivery, getting them there. It will probably, try that again. It will, we anticipate that it will require some training to be done, because this is not a system that the Ukrainians know how to use. It's not something that's in their inventory, so we're working our way through what that training would look like as well. I suspect it'll be something akin to the kind of training we gave them for the Switchblades, which didn't have to take too long. It is a similar kind of capability, more advanced in some ways, so we do anticipate the need to get them trained up on it, but we just don't have all that figured out right now.
And sorry, just my second question is on the announcement yesterday about General Terry Wolf. Can you tell me a little bit more about what his role will be and how will he interface with DoD?
I think that's a better question put to the National Security Council, because that's where Mr. Wolf will be working. But we're certainly, as we have in the past and going forward, looking forward to making sure that the whole interagency, all of us that are involved in helping Ukraine, are continue to do that in an efficient, effective way, working collaboratively with one another as we have been, and we would certainly expect that will continue with Mr. Wolf in this new position.
In crafting the packages of assistance with?
Again, I would refer you to the NSC to speak. This is a position that they've crafted here, and I think it's really more appropriate for them to speak to. What I can tell you is that as we have been, we're still going to work closely with the NSC. We're still going to work closely with the State Department. We're still going to do everything we can to get the kinds of capabilities and weapons and support to Ukraine, again, as fast as we can. So we look forward to the collaboration going forward. There has been great coordination in the past, but look, there's always room to improve and to streamline, and we look forward to doing that going forward. Yeah, Rio.
Thank you. UK Prime Minister Johnson visited India today and agreed to provide support for India's defense procurement. Is the US coordinating with the UK and other European allies to help India reduce reliance on Russia for defense procurement?
Without speaking for other nations, I mean, we certainly, you saw us talk to this issue last week at the 2+2 over at the State Department. We're always looking for ways to improve our defense partnership with India. And we certainly encourage other countries to do the same. We've been nothing but clear, as other countries have been, that we'd like to see any nations who are reliant on Russian systems not be so reliant on Russian systems. And so we welcome the UK's efforts here, and they're very much aligned with what we're doing. Yeah.
A separate question. Before Russia's invasion into Ukraine, some European countries deployed naval assets to the Indo-Pacific region along with the US to address the growing challenges posed by China. Are you concerned that the Russia's invasion could reduce Europe's ability to allocate the military assets to Asia?
No. No. China remains the pacing challenge for the department, and even as we are bolstering NATO's eastern flank with our own capabilities, even as we are continuing to flow defense articles, weapons and systems to Ukraine, we still have a significant amount of effort and energy applied to the challenges in the Indo-Pacific, and other nations do too. We are a big enough military, we are powerful enough, we are spread out enough, we are organized well to be able to handle both the pacing challenge of China and what we have described in our national defense strategy as the acute threat that Russia poses. Matt.
Thanks, John. I want to check back in on Russia's nuclear posture. Has the U.S. at this point seen any indications that they have raised their alert level or readiness levels of their nuclear forces since Putin said indicated as much several months ago? And secondly, how confident are you that the U.S. would see signs of such an elevation?
We monitor this very, very closely every day. We would never boast that we have perfect visibility on everything that Russia does or decides to do with its posture, be that conventional or unconventional. But we monitor as best we can every day. And all I would say, Matt, is that we've seen nothing and have no reason right at this point to change our own nuclear deterrent posture. We're still comfortable and confident that we have an appropriate nuclear deterrent posture to defend the homeland as well as our allies and partners. Sylvie.
Thank you. I am going to ask, it's always the same question, but I still don't understand. With all the new weapons that the West has been giving and is going to give soon to the Ukrainians, the tanks, the artillery, everything, do you assess that the Ukraine military is now has now the capacity to completely push the Russians out of the country, not out of the new zones that they.
But that's where they are. So, I mean, they're in the east and they're in the south, and
so
that's really the only
push them out.
That's the only places that they are. I think that's a question that only the Ukrainian armed forces can answer, not the United States military. What I can tell you is that we, and with another 30-plus nations, are doing everything we can to give them the tools that they need to defend themselves and to push the Russians out. I mean, but as for what their goals are on any given day, I mean, that's for them to speak to. And what their capabilities are in this part of the country or in that part of the country, that's something that they should speak to, not the United States military. What we're focused on is giving them the tools that they need to defend themselves and to defeat Russia's aggression. And that is done in an iterative conversation with them, which we have literally every day. And it's a conversation the Secretary is looking forward to having on Tuesday with other allies and partners when we're over in Germany as well, to make sure that what we're sending, and when I mean we, I mean the big we, not just the United States, but everybody, what we're sending is meeting their goals so that they can do that. But as for their capacity on any given day or in any given geographic area, that's really a better question put to them, not to the United States military. Yeah.
Hi, Elizabeth Fox. CISA had a warning earlier this week that the U.S. and other countries are under an increased cyber threat from Russia. Can you just speak to what the U.S. has done for itself since the Russian invasion to bolster its own cyber defenses and how it's helped Ukraine bolster theirs?
Yeah, I'm actually not going to be very satisfying here. We are mindful of the cyber threat that Russia poses every single day. And every single day from a variety of actors around the world, our cyber architecture gets attacked. We factor that in every day. And cyber resilience is not a static thing. You don't just finally achieve it and then can sit back. You've got to constantly modify your posture in cyberspace. And our experts at Cybercom are doing that, again, every day. I won't speak to specific attacks or specific protection measures that we have in place, but I can tell you we don't take it for granted, and it is something we're vigilant on every single day.
How big of a concern is it?
Very big concern. It has to be. We have seen what the Russians are capable of doing in cyberspace and what they and what in many cases they want to achieve, whether that's in malware, whether that's in hard cyber attacks, or whether it's in the spread of disinformation through social media in cyberspace in that way. They have proven that they have a certain agility in cyberspace. We want to make sure we're ahead of that, and we're working on it every day. Yeah. Bob?
Take you back to the Ramstein meeting again. When you described it, I think you said it was to talk about the long-term defense relationship with Ukraine, including post-war. I'm wondering whether you're alluding to, in some respect, security guarantees for Ukraine, or are you simply talking about defense equipment, weaponry, and so forth, and training?
It's really largely about modernizing and making sure their military is still potent and capable going forward. It's not about security guarantees. It's about their actual military posture
You also used the term industrial base. I'm wondering if you're referring to the American industrial base?
No, I think what we want to have a discussion with is not just our industrial base here in the United States, but the industrial base of so many other nations and how they're faring. Like you've seen us bring in CEOs from our own defense industrial base as recently as last week to talk about production of various systems. And I think the Secretary is interested in hearing what other allies and partners are doing in that regard, or if they are.
Will there be representatives from other?
No, the invites are going out to ministers of defense and senior military leaders of these countries. Yeah.
Thank you, John. Given that almost all U.S. military intelligence assessments regarding Russian invasion of Ukraine are happening now on the ground, do you have any assessment on how long this war will continue, months or years? And secondly, will the Russians focus more on annexation of the east of Ukraine rather than focusing on invading the whole country? Yeah, you made statements that Russians will focus on Donbas region and east and south of the Ukraine, but do you think that Russians have planned to annex this part like they did in 2015 to Crimea? Thank you.
I don't think anybody can predict how long this is going to go on. What we have said is because the Russians are now concentrating their efforts in a smaller geographic area, an area that they have been fighting with Ukrainian armed forces now for 8 years and have been occupying illegally in many cases, we would expect that the fighting could be prolonged, I think is how we've described it. But I don't think we're able to put a fine point on that and give you a date on the calendar and say that's how long it's going to take. We don't anticipate that it's going to be over, in days or even just coming weeks. We think it potentially could go longer than that. No, nobody wants to see that. The truth is, and I'm sure you're tired of me saying this, but it could end today. It could end now if Mr. Putin pulled his forces out and stopped this illegal invasion and sat down in good faith with Mr. Zelensky. Clearly, he has no intention of doing that. I understand it, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't still be said. The war could be over now. And I'm sorry, you had another question about, their intentions. Look, I've said from the very beginning, we're not going to be able to get inside Mr. Putin's head perfectly and know exactly what his long-term objectives are, or even his medium-term objectives. It is clear to us that he wants to focus on the east and the south. Again, particularly in the east, an area of Ukraine that he has been fighting with Ukrainian forces over. Now, whether his intention is to try to gobble that up and then sit down at the negotiating table and say, okay, I won, this is what I wanted all along. Don't pay any attention to what I said about Ukrainian sovereignty and the capital city and the Zelensky government. This is what I really wanted, and that's the leverage he wants at the table. We just don't know. Or would you want to gobble that up so that you can then use that as staging areas for further invasions more westerly into Ukraine and again try to threaten the capital city. We just don't know. What we do know is that they are focusing on the Donbass in the south. What we do know is that they are putting more enablers in there, and they are adding more troops. Even over the last 24 hours, more troops have gone in. What we do know is that they are conducting offensive operations in the Donbass, and certainly they continue to bombard Mariupol. That's what we know, and that's why we're focused on getting the Ukrainians the kinds of systems and capabilities that we believe, and more importantly, they believe, are going to be useful to them in that fight that's actually ongoing right now. Courtney.
Just one more on the meeting next week in Germany. So it's. I know you said that there's a focus on what Ukraine's going to need, near term, far term, and everything. But is it possible that this could also lead to changes in the U.S. military posture in the region, i.e., potentially in this discussion with allies, there's a decision to send more U.S. troops into EUCOM or permanent basing? Like, could this actually have an impact on U.S. military footprint as well?
That's not the purpose of the meeting. Again, I don't want to get ahead of discussions that haven't happened yet. We're not looking at this meeting as a posture discussion for U.S. posture on the continent. So I wouldn't anticipate muscle movements or decisions coming out of Tuesday with respect to U.S. posture. That said, we are constantly talking to allies and partners about posture on the eastern flank, because since before the invasion, we've been adding to that posture, and we're going to keep open the possibility that those kinds of discussions will continue. But I wouldn't look at this meeting as a decision meeting for that purpose.
And then one more. Can you say if any of the Phoenix ghosts, aka Phantom ghosts, have been delivered at all to Ukraine, or when they might be?
What did you call them? The Phantom Ghosts? That's what, she keeps saying that because I think she wants that to be the name. So she just figures if she says it more that we're just going to start adopting it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like China. You just keep saying it, it becomes a thing, right?
The Phoenix Ghost, no, they have not been delivered yet.
Do you have any sense of when they might be, like, in days?
I don't. No. But we're going to try to get them there, obviously, as fast as we can, as well as the other stuff. Yeah. Let me go to the phones here. Joe Gould.
Hey, John, thanks so much for taking my question. I have two. One is kind of a follow-up on Mike Stone earlier. You know, if you could set the stage a little bit, you know, as we get this new request for Ukraine-related aid next week, how much headroom does the department have now? Drawdown authority you touched on, but I'm also thinking about funding for the Europe deployments, you know, backfill money, USAI. How much of that has been exhausted, and how limited would DoD's efforts be if Congress didn't come through?
Well, obviously, as I said in my previous answer, we are willing and we believe we're going to need to talk to Congress about the potential for some supplemental funding. I do not have a dollar figure to give you today, but as the President noted, we are close to reaching the end of drawdown authority funds, and so we certainly would expect that we're going to have a conversation with Congress going forward on what the needs would be, but I don't believe we settled on a dollar figure here in that regard. So I think this will be a discussion that we will certainly be having with members of Congress. Idris?
Joe, you want to go ahead, or?
Yeah, I guess my question is less about what the dollar figure is going to be, and more about how much headroom the Pentagon has to date, how urgent the situation is.
I'm not gonna. I don't want to detail specifically how much authority we have left, but we are getting close to the end of those funds, and so that's why we are actively engaging with members of Congress. We don't want to get into a point, Joe, where we're in extremis, where where we've actually run out of the authority and the funding to execute it. So we're having those discussions, and when there's more that we can talk about on that, we will. Idris.
Thanks, John. Just two quick things. If you could just give us an update on Mariupol, and I'm assuming it's still contested, but it's just a broad overview. And secondly, you touched on this, the meeting that's going to take place next week. I think there are always some expectations when these type of things happen, but if you could just sort of broadly let us know if there are some deliverables we should be expecting. Like at the end of this, will there be some roadmap for the next couple of years, what exactly you're going to do, or is it going to be broader than that?
Well, I think we're all hoping that that the meeting can lead to, if not specific decisions, at least a framework for getting at specific decisions going forward. So I don't have any deliverables to preview, but I think the Secretary is very much looking forward to this discussion and to and you know, to being able to speak to all of you after that meeting about what he heard and what he learned. And again, I just don't want to get ahead of the agenda right now, but we're calling it a consultative group because that's exactly what we want it to be. We want consultations. We're not going into this meeting with a pre-cooked set of outcomes at the end of it, as so often happens when you're doing things at the ministerial level. That's why we're not calling it a ministerial, even though there are a lot of ministers going, because we really want it to be a conversation, and we're not coming into that with some sort of pre-cooked outcomes all set. So let's have the discussion, let's have the meetings, let's have that conversation, and we'll see where we are on the other end of it. It is important enough, I think, just that in this critical time, as this war enters a new phase, that the convening power of the United States can still be applied to bringing people together to have specific conversations about how to support Ukraine going forward. Let's see. John Ismay, New York Times.
Yes. Can you offer anything on the Pentagon's continued acquisition of non-standard ammunition from Eastern European countries for Ukraine, and also whether any issues with insufficient supply of available quantities from those sources being at least in part behind the move to shipping more NATO standard weapons and ammunition to Ukraine?
We do continue to work with allies and partners about non-standard ammunition, and almost every day there is ammunition going into Ukraine, and much of it is what we would consider, in the words you used, John, non-standard. In other words, not U.S. caliber, not U.S. Specific ammunition. We know how important that is. It's the lifeblood here for the Ukrainian armed forces. We don't talk a lot about small arms ammunition. It doesn't get the headlines. I understand that. But in every discussion we have with the Ukrainians, they talk about how important that is. And to date, the United States has helped coordinate and deliver more than 50 million rounds of small arms ammunition to Ukraine just since the invasion. And not all of that is U.S. caliber. Now, I couldn't break it down for you in exactly how much of that's non-standard, John, but we continue to talk to allies and partners about their inventories of non-standard ammunition and continue to try to get that flowed into Ukraine, again, as much as possible. So it's very much an active part of our discussions. It is still very much an active part of the deliveries that we're helping coordinate. And it is having a truly significant impact on the battlefield. They use that ammunition literally every day in defending their country. Yeah, Goyle.
Two questions on India and Afghanistan. As far as Prime Minister Boris Johnson's visit to India is concerned, is coming during the time when there is a war going on between Russia and Ukraine, and at the same time China's expansion in the region. My question is now, China is worried as far as UK and India Defense Pact is concerned. Also, they are worried about India and US military-to-military relations. But my question is, when Defense Minister of India was here at the Pentagon, was there any discussion of a new pact, defense pact between the US and India? And if Secretary is going to make a visit soon to India, as far as this new defense pact between U.S. and India?
I don't know if I'd call it a new defense pact, but you saw we announced a new space cooperation agreement with India while the 2+2 was going on, and we had discussions all day, both here at the Pentagon and over at the State Department, about how our defense partnership can be improved. But I don't have a new pact to announce, and I certainly don't have any travel to announce or speak to today. As you know, one of the Secretary's early trips in his time in office was to India and to meet directly with Indian officials, and I'm sure at some point we'll go back.
But as far as India and Russia defense pacts are going on for so many years, and now recently also when Russian president was in India and the Indian Prime Minister was in Russia, but how you think these will play with India's new pacts with the different countries, including like now recently with UK?
I think Indian officials would be better to speak to that than we would, Goyle. I mean, it's a sovereign nation, and they should be speaking for themselves about their bilateral relations with countries. We've been very clear with India as well as other nations that we don't want to see them rely on Russia for defense needs. We've been nothing but honest about that and discouraging that. At the same time, we also value the defense partnership that we have with India, and as was evidenced a week ago, we're looking at ways to improve that going forward. That's gonna continue because it matters and it's important. And India is a provider of security in the region, and we value that. And so we're gonna look for ways to continue it.
During this 2+2 meetings in Washington at the State Department and Pentagon here, India and U.S. celebrated 75 years of relations, including diplomatic and also, of course, defense. Any thoughts on that?
Thoughts on the
75 years of relations between the two countries?
We're for it. I mean, it's a powerful statement of the strong bilateral relationship that we have with India and that we want to continue to grow. Yeah.
And my question is on Afghanistan.
You have another one?
Bombings are still going on in Afghanistan as far as education is concerned, on children and schools and all that, and people of Afghanistan still remembering the U.S. impact there. And what do you think, because they still are thanking the U.S. that how U.S. Army and U.S. helped them, but now Taliban still they are targeting the education and especially the children.
Look, we've been very clear. The Taliban will have to be held to account and responsible for the way that they are now dictating security inside Afghanistan. We do not have a U.S. military footprint in Afghanistan, nor do we plan to have one. But if the Taliban desires the kind of international respect it claims it desires, then it's going to have to behave appropriately. And obviously, we are not at a point where we would ascribe to the Taliban that level of responsible leadership. Okay. One more, and then I'm going to call it a day here. Qasim.
Hi, John, thank you. On the consultative meeting at Ramstein, you said not all the nations that were invited are NATO members. Clearly, there are 40-some countries have been invited, as you said. That number clearly is about the NATO, number of NATO allies. But could you say that there are some NATO allies who are not invited to that meeting? That's one question. And second, you said more than 20 countries have agreed to come. Are all these countries are NATO members? Has any NATO member turned down the invitation so far?
I'm not going to speak for other nations, Qasim. We have invited, again, more than 40 nations. More than 20 of them have accepted, and there are RSVPs that we still expect to be coming in. I mean, we just announced this yesterday. So you got to give us a little slack. You got to give us a little time. But having more than 20 already agree on relatively short notice, I think is a powerful statement of the convening power of the United States and the importance that not only we, but these other other nations place on Ukraine's defense needs going forward. And we look forward to having a great discussion on Tuesday in Ramstein. Okay, thanks everybody.
Helene, are you there? I didn't know that. Well, Helene, I'm off now.
National security expert Hal Kempfer. And Hal, we're rounding out the week here as we approach day 60 since the invasion began. Let's start, though, with kind of this choreographed meeting that was aired on Russian state television. And Putin was there, his defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, was there. And they essentially announced that they wanted the storming of this sprawling steel plant to end, and of course they claimed victory because they wanted it to end. They wanted the operation to cease. What does that say? Because the fighting is still ongoing there. Then this is in Mariupol.
Andrew, what it really says is they don't want to lose the number of casualties it would take to try and take that place by force. That is a very complex. It's a huge area. It's, I think, 4 square miles, and it's multi-story concrete. You got huge warehouses made of concrete. You got rail systems all over the place. But it's not just surface and above the surface. There is an extensive below surface underground tunnel system used to move things around in that complex, and that gives the ability of the defender to move forces around. So if the Russians come in, make them take a lot of casualties clearing a building, and as soon as they move forward, you rush defenders behind them. And that's just classic warfare. That's the sort of stuff we saw in Stalingrad and World War II, but it's the sort of thing you see in urban warfare. And that's this particular facility provides that capability to the Ukrainians. So what the Russians are doing is they've taken tremendous casualties trying to force their way in there. So now they're standing back, and I hate to say it, we've seen this done a lot with not just the Russians, but a number of countries do this. They simply stand back and declare victory. Even though they haven't secured the whole city, they're saying, we're declaring victory, and they're literally going to starve them out. Now, there's a lot of civilians that they're in that area as well. They're not letting any humanitarian corridor or humanitarian evacuation of those civilians. So I think what they're doing is it's kind of a terror campaign, if you will, is they're just going to let them starve to the point where the commanders on the scene have to make a decision. What are they going to do? Let everybody starve to death and die, or take the risk of surrender? Of course, with surrender with the Russians, that could also mean summary execution or a number of other things. So that's a very uncertain thing, because the Russians do not comply with the laws of war.
So, Hal, what you're saying essentially is this is a possibly face-saving maneuver in case or in the likely event that they just suffer very heavy losses while they try to take this steel plant in Mariupol. So interesting, he was, Putin, that is, was seen with his defense minister at this kind of choreographed meeting like I was alluding to. I want to just put up some of the video that I saw on Twitter that Russian state television went with today. We can just kind of comment on Putin's seemingly decrepit and frail state. Have a look at this here, Hal. And you can see how he did not even let up from the table. He held the table with both hands the entire time, and it, to me, looks like he's wincing in pain.
I think what you're looking at there is there's been a lot of speculation. I may have mentioned to you that when this thing began, I was getting word from somebody formerly with the World Bank who had spent a lot of time in Ukraine and Russia, and there was a wide-scale belief in the region amongst the financial elites that that he was suffering from some form of cancer. They thought leukemia. I've heard a couple of other cancers talked about, but a number of medical professionals who've looked at him think that that puffy face and everything might be the use of steroids that are used to often counteract the symptoms of cancer treatments. And if you look at him now, notice how he's stabilizing himself. He's stabilizing himself. He's holding on hard because, there may be some sort of involuntary twitching going on, and so he's holding on to something in order to stop the, to visibly stop the appearance of twitching. I think that was a trick that Hitler used to do, actually. He had an involuntary twitch as well.
Okay.
And then the other side is he's probably holding himself so he doesn't fall over in his chair. If it was another Russian leader, I would have suggested maybe excessive vodka usage, because that was also a history that we saw with Russian leaders. But in this case, I think he just looks ill. And it doesn't look like some transitory thing. It looks like he's not looked well this entire time. He's not looked like his old self. And I think there's just something physically wrong. And it sounds a little trite, but there has been, some have said some of the things he's been saying or doing reminds them a little bit of what they call roid rage, with steroid usage.
Oh yeah. And
it's interesting. I am not a doctor or a medical professional. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, so I can't say for certainty.
Right.
But there seems to be something physically wrong with them, and a certain sort of strange erratic behavior or erratic statements, very inconsistent with the more methodical, always somewhat diabolical, but more methodical Putin of the past.
Hal, speaking of Russia's side of all this, there was quite a forthright acknowledgement today going back to the sinking of the missile cruiser, the Moskva. Russia says one sailor died and 27 more are still missing after the ship sunk. They say 396 crew were rescued. That is a pretty stunning acknowledgement. Do you think the pressure was so great, with the families of these sailors who are missing, that they demanded accountability? Or why do you think they did this?
Andrew, I think that's exactly it. I think they're having a tough time keeping that cover story going. If someone loses their son, a sailor on that ship, you can only deny that for so long, because at some point you have to produce a live son, all right, a live sailor. And they can't do that if these sailors are gone. And the story they put out today, I mean, this was truly Hollywood, that this one sailor ran down there and turned off the boiler and saved hundreds of other sailors' lives in some sort of extremely brave moment. But, in whatever this was, somehow he was unable to save himself. I mean, it was a tearjerker when you heard it. and you know it was completely fabricated. That I don't think that happened. What probably happened was two Neptune cruise missiles or two Neptune anti-ship missiles hit the side. With that much destructive force going into the ship itself, you're going to lose a lot of sailors. No matter what time of day, you're going to lose a lot of sailors. And then when you start cooking off the ammunition on board, and my guess is the loss of life is actually probably higher than what they're, higher than estimates, current estimates, maybe higher, certainly higher than anything they're saying. And they're just trying to kind of ease this out there as best they can. But at some point, we'll find out what the loss of life was. What's interesting is the ship's complement, the ship's company. I had been reading before this that ship normally carries about 500 to 550 sailors. Okay, so they put out that they evacuated all 395.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a math wizard, but I kind of did that thing called subtraction. And I noticed we got a little bit of a gap there.
Right.
Which, if that's true, then that ship was actually operating at an 80% strength of a ship's company. Which if that was actually true, that would be a huge indicator of the state of the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. If they're going out to sea with 75 to 80% manning, that would explain a lot of things with why they couldn't do damage control and everything else. They just didn't have the number of sailors they needed to operate that ship safely.
So interesting there. Hal, let's talk about what's going on, though, in the East. We heard from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. They say today Ukrainian troops repelled 10 Russian attacks in the Donbas. They say Ukraine's military shot down 14 Russian aerial targets in the last 24 hours. What are you seeing on the ground in the Donbas? What can we expect going into the weekend, and have Russian troops advanced?
Well, Russian troops aren't really advancing much. They're doing a number of attacks. It's interesting. When the quote offensive started, there was a lot of speculation. Well, this is actually the buildup before the big offensive, and now we're seeing more activity. We're just not seeing a lot of forward movement, and they're getting they're getting repelled. Now, part of that is that the Ukrainians are really good at defending the Donbas region. I mean, this is ground. As much as we talk about this is great tank country, and it is. I mean, historically, that is probably some of the best tank fighting country in the world, and the proof is that there's been huge tank battles in that area. So historically, that's always been true. Although the ground is soft because of the rain and the spring melt, so you got a lot of mud, which really limits, even with tracked vehicles, that's going to limit what they can do. And it certainly limits their resupply with wheeled vehicles because they can't go off the hardball paved roads. But with that said, they've been basically, the Ukrainians have been fighting on this ground for 8 years. They have built an extensive defense in depth. They know this terrain backwards and forwards. They know all the firing positions. They prepared all these firing positions. They've been preparing for an offense from the Russians in this area for a very, very long time. And we've been in there training them. And I'm sure we have U.S. military that know that terrain about as well as they know the terrain of any training area in the United States, because they've gone over there and they work so hard. And so they know where to hit them. They know where the anti-tank ambush areas will be. They know how they could, which way they're likely going to come, and then how we would set up to take them down. And I think what you're seeing is all that playing out. They're running these offenses, they're putting out those combat recon patrols, or putting out those advanced guard movements, and they're just getting their noses bloodied every time they go forward. And with a demoralized force that the Russians have, when they get hit, their inclination is to pull back because they just don't have a lot of confidence. They have a lot of confidence in the plan, but they don't have a lot of confidence in their equipment, the chain of command, anything. And so I think this may not play out. Some experts have said, oh my gosh, this is going to be a replay of World War II with the T-34s rushing and smashing through the Germans and everything else. I don't think so. And I actually looked at the Javelins, the NLAWs, these TB2 drones from the Turks, and even, I don't know if they're there yet, the Switchblade drones, but I look at the combination of things, and not just the raw numbers of what they'll take out in terms of battle damage assessment, but the psychological effect this has on a demoralized force. You know, those Switchblade drones, they're buzzing around up there. That if you're in a tank or an armored personnel carrier and you know those things are up there, you know the odds are it won't kill you, but it's going to kill some. And even if it's a tank company of 10 or 15 tanks and it just takes out 1 or 2 tanks, that's enough for everybody else's.
Right.
Whoa, okay, yeah. So I think there's a lot to be said on the defense. Let's just put it that way.
All right, I want to get to some diplomatic points here. Let's bring some of those up and we heard there from Griff Jenkins that UN Secretary General is planning a visit to the Russian Federation. Antonio Guterres, it'll be interesting to see if he meets with Putin. We know he's going to be meeting with the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. That is significant. Do you think anything will come of it?
I'm going to be hopeful.
Okay.
I don't know. He a very different situation, and the Russians just took a huge hit in the UN.
Right.
And he can come in there and say things to Putin that well, frankly, no national leader could say. And so I think there's going to be another level of communication here, and probably a better conveyance of global opinion of Russia and what it's doing, with a sense of legitimacy of who's the interlocutor, if you will, of that message going to Putin than there would be. And then, interestingly, after the Moscow visit, he's going over to Kyiv to meet with Zelensky. And I have to tell you, just on that one, the logistics of how he gets from Moscow to Kyiv was something I was kind of pondering, which is he going to fly there? And if so, are they making some sort of special arrangement to allow him to fly from Moscow to Kyiv? It really, it may not sound like a big deal, but the logistics and the coordination that would have to go on just to allow that flight in this current, we're in a pitched war,
right?
Was kind of interesting.
That is,
and if they do that, I think that will say a lot. Below the line, if you will, that will say a lot about what can be done with the Russians and the Ukrainians working together, because there's a lot of coordination to have to happen for that to occur.
Also, we know that Britain today said that they will reopen their embassy in Kyiv very soon. When do you think the United States should do the same? They haven't yet. They've indicated they want to, but that would be a strong show of support. Do you think it's coming soon?
Well, what the U.S. said today, and multiple parties said, oh, no, we're not going to do it anytime soon. All right. With that said, you may recall that there has been a lot of discussion about a senior official, very, very top senior official from the U.S., going to Kyiv to meet with President Zelensky in the same way that Boris Johnson and other leaders have. And the speculation that maybe it'd be, President Biden or the vice president, or they talked about Defense Secretary Austin. I still kind of think that it might be Secretary Blinken. That would make the most sense. He's the Secretary of State. He's our nation's chief diplomat. Also, he's a lot easier to move around. If they want to do that surreptitious train thing like they did with Boris Johnson, it'd be easier to move him and his entourage that way. You can't really move the president or the vice president that way. It's just logistically very challenging. You can't do it very covertly. Let's just put it that way. He would make sense, but if you're going to open the embassy, the U.S. embassy in Kyiv, coinciding those two events would be a very logical thing. So with all of that said, I don't think it's going to happen this week, but I am looking, maybe hearing something, maybe a couple weeks down the range. And like so many other things, a lot of this will be determined by what happens on the battlefield. If the Ukrainians are holding the line or pushing back the Russian forces. And interesting today, I actually heard some speculation of what happens if the Ukrainians are actually able to move the Russians back to the February 24th lines. I found that very interesting.
That is.
And apparently it was floating around Kyiv, and it was floating around some other experts were talking about that. And it's interesting at this point in the war that we're talking about the fact that they can push them back to those lines. But if something like that were to occur, or certainly the Ukrainians are making great advances, that will provide a sense of assurity that we could probably reopen our embassy in Kyiv, and also it's safe or relatively safe to send the Secretary of State there to do it. And so that's a long way of saying I don't know, but that's my best guess.
Hal Kempfer, as always, we appreciate your time and your expertise into this. We hope you have a good weekend. What will you be looking out for going into the weekend as we near day 60 here? I know that was kind of the points of the topics I wanted to bring up. Do you have any more?
Mariupol. I'm going to be watching Mariupol very closely. I'm also going to be watching what we find out more about the atrocities. These satellite photos of the war, the mass graves around Mariupol. I think this may become a seminal event in terms of it. Depending on what we find, this could shift global opinion in ways that we haven't fully calculated yet. Bucha was bad. The other places north of Kyiv are very bad, but they're not the huge, overwhelming numbers. And if we're talking about, 9,000, or as some have alluded to, potentially tens of thousands of civilians in mass graves down around Mariupol, there is a power to numbers. And I think that may galvanize world opinion. And it's also going to be something that may work its way into that conversation in Moscow with the Secretary General, with Putin. So we'll see. I'm watching that closely.
All right. So, Hal, thanks you so much. We do hope you have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you again.
All right. You too, Andrew.
And of course, all of Europe will be watching the French presidential elections happening this weekend. The face-off is set between President Macron and his challenger, Marine Le Pen. Joining me now to discuss the election is Simone Rodin-Benziken. She's the managing director of the American Jewish Committee, joining us live from Paris right now. Simone, thanks so much for being with us. And I think a lot of people are wondering, will Macron pull this off? Or will Le Pen have an upset? That is very plausible. What say you?
Well, it's always difficult to make predictions, but I would say that at least in the polls right now, it seems that Emmanuel Macron, the current president, will win the elections. But of course, when you look back to other elections, including in the United States, when you look at Brexit, you never know. There is always a chance that despite relatively good polls these days, it seems that he's polling at around 56, 57, 58%, that there's still a chance that she could, at the end of the day, win. It very much depends on who is going to go and vote, if there's going to be a big abstention, if the people, in particular, the voters of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the third up runner from the far left, they will actually decide to go and vote for him or her. So there's still a lot of uncertainty these days.
Yeah, of course. How do you think this compares to their first matchup back in 2017? Are you seeing similarities, or are the issue sets different? Is polling different from what it was in 2017?
I think the situation is slightly different. First of all, I would say that Marine Le Pen, who comes from the far right, who has inherited the party of her father, has managed over the years to convince voters that she's somehow normal, that she's not the far right anymore. So she's, I think, more and more seen as a normal candidate, representing to some extent the people. And so, yeah, it is slightly different. The issues are, of course, the same. The issue of immigration, the issue of Islamism. Of course, we have gone through 5 years, even more, of different crises. Of course, the Ukraine war, the COVID crisis, the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vests. But yeah, the situation is of course serious. There have been a number of crises, and we'll see. We'll see who will prevail.
Yeah, of course, that was my next question. Has Marine Le Pen kind of moderated her views this time around? Because there was a really contentious televised debate between the two of them this week, where Macron really hammered her on her ties to Russia vis-a-vis Vladimir Putin, on her calls to kind of weaken the NATO alliance, to weaken the European Union. Do those, I guess, tenets of Le Pen's ideology still hold true to this day, or have they weakened a bit?
Well, she has moderated her position, in particular with relations to Russia. But it's a difficult one to defend. The reality is that Marine Le Pen, over the past decade, has had a very pro-Russian, pro-Putin stance. She has traveled to Russia several times. She has met with Vladimir Putin. She was one of the only French leaders who has recognized Crimea back in 2014. She has also, as Emmanuel Macron in the debate said very, very clearly, she has contracted a loan from a Russian bank. So actually Emmanuel Macron accused her of not interacting with Russia or with Vladimir Putin, but as he said, with his banker. So it's very difficult for her, obviously, to show support for Ukraine, to show support for Vladimir Zelensky. But nevertheless, I would say that it's probably not the only issue French voters will look for. Of course, the issue of the economy, of the future. There are many people, in particular lower middle class people, who are somewhat desperate, who feel that they are losing out in the world of globalization, who feel that the European Union is not delivering what they should be delivering in their everyday lives. And so to them, I think Marine Le Pen has definitely a certain appeal.
That's so interesting, because a lot of issues that Americans are facing here at home are many of the same that the French people are facing: high gas prices, inflation, and so much more. But on that point, though, with the war in Ukraine, we have seen this coalescing of European support for the country of Ukraine, for Ukrainians. And especially in the West, if there is a Le Pen victory, I've been speaking to, I guess, political scientists and watchers of this in the West, who says that this could be a political earthquake if Le Pen wins, that could really throw a wrench into this alliance that has coalesced so strongly around Ukrainian war efforts. And so are you worried about that? Are the French people worried about that, that it could weaken the support for Ukraine if she wins?
There is definitely concern. I would say there is concern, I think, also from European allies. I don't know if you've seen, but something that doesn't happen very often. Foreign countries, foreign leaders have actually expressed support for Emmanuel Macron. There was an op-ed by the leader of Spain, Portugal, and Germany supporting Emmanuel Macron. There is absolutely fear that Marine Le Pen could be elected, and therefore it could substantially change Europe's position in support of Ukraine.
All right, Simone Rodin-Benzaken, thank you so much for offering that glimpse for Americans, especially into the French elections this weekend, and we'll be watching it alongside you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
She's off to Notre Dame next year. I've done the commencement there a couple of times. I told her if she sees me on campus, I don't want her to say Joe who when I come up to see her. Promise?
Promise.
God love you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mom. Lisa and Juliana, thank you for that introduction. And, as my mother would say, God love you. You're saving lives. You're saving lives by pointing out what needs to be done. I want to start off, though, by pointing out a couple things. Number one, as was mentioned earlier, my wife, Jill, is a community college professor. I believe she's the only first lady ever to work full-time, and she's still working full-time as a community college professor, and that's why she's not with me today. But one of the things we're also working on, just parenthetically, and this is a great college, it really is. Thanks to the leadership of the governor, you have one of the best systems in the country. And I want you to know, though, that we know, and I know firsthand, my wife's an English professor and teaches writing as well. The number of students that come back to schools like this and the community college where Jill teaches, Northern Virginia Community College, are coming back having not been in school for a long time, many times. coming back because they want to better their lives, breaking their necks to get here. Some of them, and the average age of my wife's students is 28 years of age. That's the average age. People coming back from coming through difficult circumstances they find themselves in. And back east, a number of immigrant families coming through. And the cost is still, no matter how the states try to control it, still matters. So one of the things that it didn't do all I wanted to do, but was just able to sign a new budget bill that increases the Pell Grants by $400 a year. The largest increase in 10 years, but we have to do more. Look, I want to say a special thank you to Governor Inslee for his welcome and his partnership across a broad range of issues, including strengthening the economy, your economy, and fighting the pandemic. But, you know, I refer to him, and he knows this to be true, because when I was back seeking the nomination, he is the environmental governor of the nation. This guy is leading the whole country. And you have one heck of a congressional delegation. Starting with my friend Patty Murray. You know, when we passed the Recovery Act that we did, the first bill we passed, I went to Patty and I said, I want to deal with the child tax credit, which was something that had to be done. Patty's been fighting for it for years and years and years. I got it passed. We got it passed. And it reduced child poverty in America by 40%. But because of a couple folks, because we don't have this, we lack one Democrat and 50 Republicans from keeping it from passing this time around. But it really fundamentally changed the lives of millions of people, Patty. You know it better than I do. But it reduced child poverty by 40%. And she talked about earlier about the cost of child care. I was a single dad for 5 years when my wife and daughter were killed in an automobile accident. And I commuted every day, 250 miles, 270 miles a day, from Wilmington, Delaware to Washington, D.C. on Amtrak. Everybody thought I did it because I just wanted to be home. That's true, but I did it because I couldn't possibly afford child care. I was a United States Senator. I had the dubious distinction for 36 years of being listed as the poorest man in the Senate, but I was making a lot of money as a senator from my perspective. And I didn't think I should be making any money other than my salary as a senator. And I could not possibly afford, even back in 1972 and 3, I could not afford child care. That's why I went home every single night, over 200,000 miles worth of my career. And folks, there's easy answers. There's easy answers. We can do all that Patty and I and others have been talking about, and not one person in America making less than $400,000 a year will see a single solitary increase in their taxes. Not one. Not a single increase. And folks, you know, I've sometimes been called by some of my interesting Republican friends, Democrats are all socialists. I'm a capitalist. And I think if you can make $1 billion or $1 million or $100 million, you should be able to do it. But pay your fair share. Pay your fair share. I come from the corporate state of the world, Delaware. More corporations are incorporated in Delaware than every other state in the union combined. And I got elected 6 times as senator, notwithstanding that. Here's the point. On the Fortune 500 companies, 40 of them last year, they made $40 billion and didn't pay a single solitary penny in taxes. It's not right. It's just not fair. All they got to do is just pay a fair share. And we can do all of this and so much more, but that's not what my point being here tonight. Today, I should say. And Senator Cantwell, she's been a champion in this state to keep clearing the bipartisan infrastructure law. delivering high-speed internet all across the state of Washington, and because we're going to outcompete the rest of the world. She understands how we do it. We got to have you have access to that information. Think about it. During the pandemic, how many of you parents had to drive your kids into a McDonald's parking lot to get on the internet to be able to do your homework? Not a joke. This is the United States of America, for God's sake. The United States of America. Because of this lady and others, we are going to see to it every single place in this country, rural, urban, and suburban, has access to high-speed internet. And Congresswoman Shire, who represents a district, a doctor, an MD, who knows what folks go through in our healthcare system and knows how to make it better. This includes how to fill the nursing shortage to help colleges like this one train and prepare the next generation of nurses and healthcare workers. My wife and her went to Delaware Community College and now in Northern Virginia teaches an awful lot of nurses. And by the way, docs are okay. I've been a significant consumer of health care in my career. Unfortunately, I was hospitalized for the better part of 7 months with 2 cranial aneurysms and an embolism, and my son Bo came back as a decorated war hero from Iraq after a year of stage 4 glioblastoma, and spent 15 months at the end just hanging on. And doctors let you live. Nurses, male and female, I'm not joking, any of you in nursing programs, they make you want to live. Not a joke. Not a joke. I think it's the single most underrated profession in the United States of America. I really mean it. When I was at Walter Reed all those months, I'd lie there in that ICU and look at the monitors. And if any of those lines go flat, you're in trouble. But seriously, after a while, and you've seen this, Doc, you just get tired. Wasn't in pain, just get tired, just want to stop. And my nurses, I remember to this day their names. They'd come in and they'd change the pillow, they'd rub my head, they'd do something, they'd keep you moving, talk to you. That's why what I did was they said everybody comes out of an intensive care unit, the joke is in hospitals is they either get taken out in the nurses never see me, they either get taken out in a bag and or they never want to come back. I used to go back once a month and have dinner with the nurses every night on the night shift to thank them. So any of you well, I'm not sure how many are part of the college, but any of you studying nursing, keep it. Well, God love you. Oh, I really mean it. And I don't want to disappoint you, because the male nurses are as consequences of the female nurses, okay? Not a joke. And so anyway, I just wanted to mention that, and I want to thank Congresswoman Kilmer and for the nearby district, the 6th district, I guess. He's leading the charge in the economy to make sure that we leave no community behind. And we're also joined today by Larson and I know. You're going to... No, I got it. Del Bene, who's a real champion for working families. And while she couldn't be here today, Congresswoman Jayapal is doing an incredible job in the state. She's visiting. She's been a great partner of mine and worked really close with me. And she's visiting her family now, and she'll be back shortly. But folks, we're all laser focused on lowering the costs for you and your families across the board. And a big way to do that is lower the cost of health care. Health care, especially in the area of prescription drugs. The governor in this state has already gotten insulin down to $35 for, I guess it's a year you've done it so far. Is that right? Well, either early this month, President Obama came back to the White House. He's a good friend. He came back to the White House for the first time in a long time to celebrate the 12th anniversary of the Affordable Care Act. And we talked about how hard it was to get it done in the first place and why we were so determined to get it done. It was for the people who desperately needed it and had no alternatives. and deserve to be treated with, as my dad, the word he used most, is everyone is entitled to be treated with dignity. Everyone. And there's no loss of your dignity like not being able to take care of a child who's sick, or a wife or a spouse or husband. And countless Americans lie in bed at night staring up at the ceiling, wondering what happens? What happens if I get sick? What happens if I get prostate cancer or my wife gets breast cancer? What do we do? How do we take care of the family? Who's going to pay for it? What's going to happen? Thousands and thousands of Americans stare at that ceiling. So we did it with the idea that an American health care should be a right, not a privilege. And well, with the help of the leaders here at a federal and state level, we began to make some good on the proposition of fighting and defending and improving the Affordable Care Act after it got passed. You know, if we can hold for a second here, remember, my colleagues remember, I was out of office 1 year as vice president. They ended the term in the 2018 elections. And you remember the other team wanted to do away with Obamacare. They had scores of court cases, scores of votes to try to eliminate it. But what happened was a lot of people didn't, Barack is kind of a humble guy. And I used to say to him after we won that Affordable Care fight, I said, you ought to take a victory lap. Let people know what happened. He said, we don't have time. We don't have time. Oh, guess what? I went into 58 races that year to campaign where there was an incumbent Republican and a Democrat running. I only went with Republicans who wanted to eliminate the Affordable Care Act. And what I pointed out was, if in fact that Republican won that year and they took back the Congress, what was going to happen? Anyone with a pre-existing condition could not get coverage again. Not just an Affordable Care Act, but couldn't get coverage in your personal insurance you paid for. And all of a sudden, people went, whoa, we won 44 of those races. On the one thing, knowing they were going to eliminate the idea that if you have a pre-existing condition, you couldn't get coverage. Now you can under the Affordable Care Act. Within the first months of my administration, we passed the landmark American Rescue Plan, a law that not only helped us get COVID-19 under control and our economy back on track, but millions of people, millions of people more insured under the Affordable Care Act. We made it easier for people to sign up for coverage in the middle of the pandemic. We opened a special enrollment period and gave millions of Americans more time to enroll in the Affordable Care Act. We quadrupled the number of navigators out in the communities helping folks know how to sign up to get the coverage. And here in Washington State, about 240,000 folks signed up for ACA coverage just last year, an additional 240,000. And we're continuing to expand Medicaid in states. You know, there were a total of 36 states who said we're going to cover, even though the federal government say we're going to cover it for free in the beginning, and they have to eventually sign on to help pay for it. Well, we added 2 more states. That's millions of people who have now Medicaid coverage. Over 31 million Americans now have health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. And that includes nearly 900,000 people across the state of Washington. 4 out of 5 Americans can find quality coverage for under $10 a month in the Affordable Care Act. We made it cheaper to purchase the premium plans under the Affordable Care Act. The average family today, since we passed that law in our administration, are saving $2,400 in annual premiums and getting better coverage. That's $200 savings every month, allowing them to have more money available for other needs in their lives. With inflation, with Putin's gas tax, with the groceries because of the loss of access to the wheat fields in Russia and in Ukraine, prescription drugs and other necessities, that $200 can make a difference in a month. The bottom line is this: the Affordable Care Act is stronger now than it's ever been, and we're strengthening it even further. Earlier this month, I signed an executive order directing the federal agency to continue doing everything they can in their power to expand the quality of affordable health care coverage. This work builds on what we've done to end the surprise charges you often see on medical bills, particularly at hospitals. Any of you who've been hospitalized, I hope they haven't had to, but if you've been lately and you found out your coverage doesn't cover certain particular doctors, but you then get a surprise bill for a couple $1,000 because without your knowledge, they had another doctor looking at what you needed to do. No surprise bills anymore. They can't do that. They can't do that. No more surprise medical billing. And separately, we're fixing what was referred to as the family glitch. But that is a common issue facing 5 million Americans who can't get financial help or get coverage under the Affordable Care Act. Here's the problem. Under the current rules, a working mom is told that as long as she can afford employer-based coverage herself, she can't qualify for premium subsidies of the Affordable Care Act to afford coverage for the rest of her family. And so we changed that. We propose starting next year, working families will get the help they need to afford family coverage under the Affordable Care Act. And as a result, these families will save hundreds of dollars a month. With this change, it's estimated that 200,000 presently uninsured Americans will gain coverage. Nearly 1 million Americans will see their coverage become more affordable. This is considered one of the best things and biggest thing my administration can do is lower costs and expand coverage. You talked about, I talked about and was mentioned by several who spoke before me about just a little breathing room. I was raised in a town in Delaware, and it was a nice neighborhood. It was a 3-bedroom split-level home when they were developing suburban areas, housing developments, that with 4 kids, a mom and a dad and a grandpa living with us. And the walls were thin. And you could hear, I remember one day, it's a true story, one day one night I hear my dad was really restless getting up and down. And I asked my mom the next morning before I went to school what was wrong with Dad. She said, they told him, honey, that they're not going to cover insurance anymore in his job, health insurance. Well, like I said, it's about dignity. It's about worrying about your family. So we need to keep this fight up. And Republicans, and I, as you know, I get criticized by the press because I'm not partisan enough, okay? Well, this is not your father's Republican Party, as I said. They continue to attack the Affordable Care Act and want to eliminate it. They're unrelenting. multiple court challenges, sabotage from previous administration, over 70 attempts to repeal the law by Republicans in Congress, 70 times. In fact, just last month, Republican Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin said, if the Republicans get back in power and take back the House and Senate, they should repeal the Affordable Care Act again. 12 years later, Republicans still haven't stopped their attacks on this life-saving law. So, pay close attention. If they have their way, it means 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions once again be denied health coverage. Not hyperbole, this is a fact. Will be denied health care coverage by their insurance companies. That's what the law was before Obamacare. In addition, tens of millions of Americans could lose their coverage, including young people who will no longer be able to be covered by their parents' plans up to age 26. Premiums are going to go through the roof. So there's a lot at stake. Well, I've got a better idea. Instead of destroying the Affordable Care Act, let's keep building on it. Extend the American Rescue Plan subsidies that we've already passed, allowing premiums and expanded coverage, lower premiums, expanded coverage. Close the Medicaid coverage gap that locks nearly 4 million Americans out of coverage just because they're in states that refuse to expand Medicaid. And let's do something that will bring down prices, lower the cost of prescription drugs. Let me note parenthetically, the only thing that Medicare cannot negotiate with healthcare providers on are drugs. They can tell you they're only going to pay X amount of money for doctor visits, Y amount of money for a particular operation, etc. But the only thing they can't negotiate are prescription drugs, except for one area. We insisted a long time ago that the department that relates to the military, you have a great guy running the Veterans Affairs now. Veterans Affairs can say, we're not going to pay you any more than X or Y for this particular drug. But you can't do that for anything else. Medicare can't do that anywhere else. In America, we pay the highest prescription drug cost of any developed nation in the world. That's a fact. It's about 2.5 to 3 times higher than paid for the same exact drug, the same manufacturer in other countries. For example, the anti-cancer drug to treat leukemia and lymphoma costs $1,400 a month in the United States. Some of you may know that. The same exact drug, the same exact company, same distribution, costs $6,000, not $14,000, in France. Same company, American company, same exact amount. It's unconscionable. Today, 1 in 4 Americans who need prescription drugs struggle to afford them. Nearly 30% of people needing essential drug doses that they're supposed to take, 30% skip their doses because they want to extend life of the drug that they need. Many people use over-the-counter drugs instead and cut pills in half because they can't afford them. There's others simply not fill their prescriptions at all. As I said, for God's sake, this is the United States of America. What are we doing? It's simply wrong, especially since it doesn't cost the drug companies nearly as much to make the drug or the research that went into it. There's a system they have in Germany and other countries that the drug company can charge, the price is set when they in fact try to bring the drug on market. It's like in our case, the FDA approve it. And the way it works is they go, how much did you invest to come up with the drug? How much did you put in? And they allow a healthy profit of 10, 20, 30, 40%. and say that's what you can sell it for in our country. Unless you invest more to improve the drug and show you put more into it. Otherwise, it can't go above the cost of inflation. Look, the insulin we were talking about, you know how much it costs to make that vial of insulin? $10. TEN, $10 to treat diabetes, $10. A condition that affects millions of Americans, including a congresswoman. But some families have to pay hundreds of dollars a month. Some even over $1,000. The average cost is $863 a month. Or excuse me, $683 a month for a life-saving insulin. You just heard Lisa and Julia talk about trying to afford insulin and treat the type 1 diabetes. Imagine what it's like if you don't have insurance and you don't have the cash to look at your child, knowing what they need, and knowing there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Not only your child put in jeopardy, you're deprived of your dignity. How do you look at your child and deal with it? And there's no excuse, none. We're not asking drug companies to do anything that they can't afford. If you think it doesn't affect you, it does. Everyone has less money in their pocket today because of the high cost of health care. Over the past decade, health care costs have gone up 50%. And a major reason for that increase is the cost of the drugs in health care. Folks, we may not agree on everything. I think it's safe to say that all of us, whatever our background, our age, where we live, agree that prescription drugs are outrageously expensive. So here's what I'm proposing. I met with the 12 largest drug manufacturers when I did the initiative the last President Obama, when I was Vice President, allowed me to do, to deal with the cost of this. And I met with them, and I said, what if you find the cure for a particular drug? What should you be able to charge for a major cancer facility? They said, whatever the market will bear. I said, no. I said, here's the deal. Here's what I think you should do. If you have to spend millions of dollars, you should be able to recoup everything you put into it. But if it's way beyond the cost of the average American, the federal government should step up and compensate you for it, so that, in fact, the American people can still have life-saving drugs. So here's what I'm proposing with the help of the members of Congress. First, let's cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month. That still means it cost them 10, 3.5 times as much as it cost them. Second, let's end the days when companies could increase prices with no oversight and no accountability. If drug companies increase their prices faster than the rate of inflation, they should have to face a steep tax. We're saying that, by the way, we wouldn't let utility companies do it. Utilities can't all of a sudden raise the cost of the utilities you raise. We're saying, drug companies, you're finally going to be held accountable when you raise prices for the American people. You should be able to make a significant profit, but not gouge. Third, let's cap the amount that seniors on Medicare have to spend for prescription drugs each year. If you're on Medicare, you won't have to spend more than $2,000 out of pocket, which is a lot of money. And that's more than $170 a month, no matter how many prescriptions you're taking, because the Medicare will take up the rest. Drug companies, insurance companies, Medicare, and pick up the rest of the cost. And finally, let's give Medicare the power to negotiate prescription drug prices for every other type of health care. It uses it to leverage lower prices for American seniors. But for prescription drugs, the only prescription drug Medicare is prohibited by law from negotiating to get the best deals for seniors. And by the way, it doesn't put the drug company. We're just saying Medicare is not going to buy it. They're not going to buy it beyond a certain price. It doesn't mean you can't continue to manufacture and ask $1 billion for it, but the federal government's not going to pay for it. It's long past time we get rid of these absurd limitations. Let Medicare negotiate fair prices. Reflect the cost of the research, the development, the need for a significant profit, but also affordable for seniors. Let me close with this. I grew up in a family where prices went up for things that were daily requirements like the gallon of gasoline. It became a discussion at the kitchen table. It mattered. It was always on the margins. We felt it. That's why I'm so focused on doing everything I can to lower the cost of gas and energy and accelerate our transition to clean energy. I also know there are other basic needs that affect the standard of living for most families. I was a single dad, as I said, for 5 years. I couldn't afford child care. No way I could, but I had a sister and a brother. We have an expression in my family, for real, not a joke. If you have to ask, it's too late. Think about it, I mean. So when my wife and daughter were killed and the boys came home from the hospital, I found out my sister and her husband had already moved into my house. I'd purchased an old farmhouse, a colonial farmhouse in northern Delaware, and it had a little barn on it as well. It was only a couple acres. My brother came in and spent money changing the barn and the upstairs of the barn into an apartment. My brother and sister moved in. I dropped my kids off every morning when I'd go to the train station with my mom. But look, as I said, I had a good job. How do people make it? But I know child care is hard. It costs a lot of money. That's why, with your members of Congress, led by Patty, who's an absolute leader on this, I want to cap the cost of child care for families making under $125,000 to 7% of your income. We can do these things without raising taxes a penny on anyone, as I said, making under $400,000. The bottom line is this. When I was running for the president, you heard me say 1,000 times, you probably got tired of it, you're tired of it now, that we're going to build this economy around you, the American middle class. Because when the middle class does well, the poor have a way up and the wealthy do very well. They never are hurt when the middle class is doing well. And we're going to deal in people and the places that have been left out and left behind. We're making progress. Over the course of my presidency so far, 14 months, we've created 7.9 million good-paying jobs, more jobs created in 14 months than any presidency in a year ever. The unemployment rate is 3.6%, down from 6.4% when I took office. The fastest decline in unemployment at the start of any presidency ever recorded. Washington State, you've added 218,000 jobs, and unemployment dropped from 6.3 to 4.2%. Last year, in 2021, we cut, and all this was going on, we cut the deficit. You know, all my friends talk about how they care about the deficit. We cut it $350 billion last year. And this year, in 2022, we're on track to cut the deficit by more than, I want to mark it down because you'll remind me of this, by $1.3 trillion. 1.3. That stays on course with the largest one-year reduction of a deficit in history. This is particularly important now as we work to reduce pressure on inflation. From Washington State to all across America, we've gone from on the mend to on the move. We're coming at our challenges from a position of strength. I'm more optimistic about America today than I've been in my whole life, my whole career. Because I see a future that's within our grasp. We're the only nation on earth, think about this now. We're the only nation on earth that has always come out of every crisis we've ever met stronger than we went in it. No other nation in the world can say that. It's because of you, because of the ingenuity and determination of the American people. We've just looked at opportunity and seized it. That's exactly what we're doing today. So as my grandfather Figgin used to say, with the grace of God, the goodwill of the neighbors, and the creek not rising, we're going to do well. It's going to be hard for a while getting through the cost of gasoline and energy because of Putin and the war. But we're going to do it. And with your help, and I say to all the folks who are students here, I wish you well. We need you badly. And the reason I'm so optimistic, think about it. You are the least prejudiced, the most involved, the most concerned generation in American history. You really are. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless you all. Appreciate it. Thanks. Years ago, and on my own, I came up here to take a look, and it's really quite beautiful. Governor Inslee, who is known where I'm from as the environmental governor, and Mayor Harley, Senator Murray, Senator Maria Cantwell, I mean, you got everybody here. You got Representative Smith, Larson, DeBene, Schreier, and it's an honor to be in this beautiful park with y'all. You know, Edward Abbey, the writer who once worked as a park ranger, I didn't know he had been a park ranger, to tell you the truth, wrote to follow him. Every man, every woman carries in heart and mind an image of an ideal place, the right place, the one true home, known or unknown, actual or visionary. For many Seattle families, I think we're in that place right now, here in this park. And places like this. There are not that many like this, unfortunately. And all around this country, there used to be a hell of a lot more forests like this, but we're doing everything we can. Everybody behind me and all of you want desperately to protect what we have and increase what we have. You know, our natural wonders inspire, and the reflection inspires to take action. You know, My mother had an expression, and I apologize to my colleagues. They've heard me do two things my whole career: quote my mother and father, and quote Irish poets. But I'm not going to quote the Irish poets today, okay? But she said, out of everything difficult, something good will come if you look hard enough for it. And I think that we're in one of those moments in world history and in American history where we've reached the point that the crisis on the environment has become so obvious, with the notable exception of the former president, that we really have an opportunity to do things we couldn't have done 2, 5, 10 years ago. And I want to talk about that today with leaders who understand that to their core, the folks standing behind me. I wish you didn't have to stand. Don't you guys have any chairs? I'm not used to them standing for me, Anyway, but here's the deal. As I said, Governor Inslee is the climate governor. And I've gone to him throughout asking him for advice and counsel. And thanks for welcoming me back to Washington State, Gov, and to Mayor Harrell. The passport to the city is very much appreciated. I hope I don't do anything to have it revoked. And Congressman Smith, thank you for your commitment to the environment, including helping our armed forces transition to clean energy technologies. One of the things I've found out as the President of the United States, I get to spend a lot of that money. I get to decide where, no, I'm not joking. And we're going to completely, we're going to start the process where every vehicle in the United States military, every vehicle is going to be climate friendly. Every vehicle. We're going to have no, I mean it. We're spending billions of dollars to do it. And it's going to matter. It matters. In my view, this crisis, as I said, is a genuine opportunity. An opportunity to do things we wanted to do and only now have become so apparent. On this day, 52 years ago, millions of Americans of every age and background rallied together on Earth Day. A guy I worked with as a young senator back in those days was a guy named Gaylord Nelson from Wisconsin. And the guy who helped organize Earth Day was a guy who's from Delaware, worked for me as well, and Mike McCabe. And, they had a vision for a healthier, more prosperous America. And over time, they delivered. They delivered. Cleaner water, proof that sustainable environment can mean a stronger economy. And one of the things I'm proudest of in our administration, before I went into detail with my quote green agenda, I got all the unions together. Literally got all the unions together. Bigger said the unions view it as against their interest. And starting with the IBW electric workers, they endorsed it. And every union has stepped up because they figured it out. Their jobs, they're the ones who can help us transition in ways like never before. It's not going to cost them jobs. It's going to increase jobs. The IBW is going to be building 50,000 electric stations, electric starting stations all across America, for example. And so look, change continues today, and a new generation of Americans helping us lead the way against the threat of climate change. Every time I get a little down, I don't know about my colleagues, I suspect they're the same, I just turn on the television or take a look at all the young people. This young generation is not going to put up with all this stuff. No, they're not. I mean, they are really, really energized. Whether it's basic human rights or it's the environment, they're just not stopping. And from day one of my administration, we've stood with them. Governor, I hate to admit it, but I was part of that early Earth Day. I was only 7 years old, but God, oh my Lord, I can't admit I said that. But anyway, it's been a passion of mine as long as I've been involved in public life. The first thing, what got me involved in politics, not that it matters to you all, but I was thinking about it on the way over here. I was a young attorney in Delaware, and they wanted to, across the top of my state, they wanted to connect two highways. And it's through what is the most beautiful part of the state. But instead of being willing to do it in an area that in fact had no consequence for the environment, they decided to put it through areas that were straighter but more damaging. And I got involved to try to stop the construction of that highway, which I did. That's what got me involved. and it caused me great problems because I ended up having to run for the county council, which was the hardest job I ever had. Didn't want it. At any rate, but as a matter of fact, in 1986 in the United States Senate, I introduced and we passed the first Global Climate Protection Act, the first time, and it was a warming legislation in the Senate. And on Earth Day, we convened last year over 40 leaders from around the globe, reasserting America's leadership on climate after 4 years of administration denying that there was a climate crisis, denying that there was any need to do anything about the environment. And the commitments galvanized at that meeting, including our own goal of cutting emissions from 50 to 52% below 25 levels by 2030 and reaching net zero emissions by 2050, taking the steps the United States needs to limit the planet's warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the rest of the world started to come along. We did more than set bold goals. We acted to achieve them. Last year, with all the disappointments we faced, but last year the United States deployed the most solar, wind, and battery storage in American history. And we made record-setting investments in clean energy in rural America. For example, we have a $1 billion program that no one knows about except the Department of Agriculture, the grants and loans for farmers and rural co-ops to deploy solar and storage and power lines to carry clean energy across the country. We're investing in technology so you can heat and cool your home when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, because out here in Silicon Valley, you're developing the battery technology. They showed me one that's about a little bit wider than this podium, about that thick and about this wide, that in fact you can install in your home, and when the sun ain't shining, that stored electricity runs the whole deal. And by the way, windmills don't cause cancer. And across the country, we have enough clean energy capacity to power now 56 million homes. Now, here's what we're doing with automobiles. I'm an automobile buff. I have a '68 Corvette that does nothing but pollute the air, but I don't drive very much. I brought together the automobile manufacturers, and Mary Barry, who runs General Motors, is a fine person. At the time, she was suing the state of California, General Motors, for their increased mileage requirements that exceeded the federal standard. The federal standard. And the argument Ford, General Motors was making was you couldn't exceed the federal standard locally. And we had a long talk. And I didn't suggest it, but she dropped that suit and contacted me and said, I'm going to make a commitment. I brought together the American automobile industry and they agreed on an ambitious goal, 50% electric vehicles by sales by year 2030. That's the commitment that they made. I didn't make it for them. They made it because they've realized what the future is. I saw it when I drove Ford's all-electric 150 pickup truck, which I might add, which was disappointing. It's faster than my Corvette. You think I'm kidding? It's a 4.2. Although I did suggest if I'm out of office and they have the first electric Corvette, I want to buy it. But at any rate, when I drove the electric Jeep Wagoneer around South Lawn of the White House. To date, automakers have announced investments of more than $100 billion in EV manufacturing. $100 billion. That's along with us setting ambitious standards to cut pollution in cars and trucks, to boost fuel economy standards, which we're going to be announcing very soon, upping the mileage requirement for the minimum mileage requirement. But that's not all. The bipartisan infrastructure law, which the folks behind me are the reason why that occurred, I signed, provides billions of dollars for a nationwide network of 500,000 charging stations. 500,000. And with electric school buses, by the way, went down to North Carolina. You should see the factory down there. These buses, they have electric vehicles. It has a platform, folks, from me to you, about that thick, weighs about 6 zillion pounds, no engine, nothing else. That's it. But it's all electric. And guess what? We're going to eliminate tens of thousands of diesel school buses, which pollute the air and pollute the lungs. And look, this industry and union workers are all stepping up. And there's a lot more. Here in Washington State, you're going to triple the federal commitment to your link. We're going to triple the federal commitment to your Link Light rail system, speeding progress in the largest transit. As my colleagues in the Senate will recall, I was referred to as Mr. Amtrak. I've taken over 1,200,000 miles in Amtrak, commuting every single day. You think I'm joking? For 36 years, every single day the Senate was in session to go home and see my kids. And but the folks, you know, it's a simple proposition. Most people don't realize it. Given a choice to go from point A to point B and rail, electric rail, or drive your automobile, if you can get there fast or faster on rail, you take the rail. The estimates will take millions of vehicles off the road. The largest transit construction project in the country that runs entirely on clean energy. The bipartisan infrastructure law provides $66 billion. It's passed, $66 billion for freight rail, $39 billion for public transit, $10.6 billion for clean electric buses, and $2.5 billion for clean ferries on my coast of Delaware and out here for you all. This will take millions of cars worth of pollution off the road and get people to places quicker. You know, look, I think one Amtrak train carries as many passengers, I know the statistics, as 6 lanes of a major interstate highway. That's how many passengers it carries. Look, it matters. We saw new standards. We set new standards. We slashed methane and brought over 100 nations together when I was at the big meeting we had in Europe. Nations around the globe, and I got them to. There's 2 things I was able to accomplish. One, I got a pledge from I think it was 144 of them, that they would eliminate methane and do the same thing we're doing to keep it. It's the most damaging of all the pollutants that are going up. We also set new standards for super polluting HFC emissions. Remember the big fight we had? I know, because when I almost lost an election because the DuPont company makes the long story. Anyway, but look, we set new standards for cleaner cement. You say, what the hell are you talking about, Joe? This is probably the only audience to understand cleaner cement. Cement is an incredible pollutant. An incredible pollutant. And it matters because cement's responsible for 8% of the global climate emissions. Cement. I got to admit to you, as long as I've been involved in this, until 2 years ago, I didn't know that. And we're delivering across the country. Lots of folks have promised it, but my administration is actually delivering revitalizing communities across Appalachia. Look, folks, I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania, where I was raised. The reason I got to Delaware is coal died. My dad was not in the coal mines. He was in sales. But the whole economy died. And, you know, you can understand why in places like West Virginia and southeastern Pennsylvania, and why people were worried about doing away with coal. You know, but it's their jobs. They don't know what they're going to do. But guess what? In the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the law is going to help us cap and seal abandoned mines. There's thousands of abandoned mines. Cap and seal them. They're no longer going to see pollution in the air or the water. The law is putting abandoned mine workers to work at the same salary they were working digging the mines in the first place. There's several thousand of these wells that have to be capped, and they have to harvest the energy, and they're going to get paid. So we've provided alternatives. They're manufacturing and installing solar panels where they once dug for coal. Look, out here in the West, we're repowering retired power plants and clean hydrogen and advanced nuclear, making them economic hubs again. And in the heartland, in the fields that feed our country, we're planting cover crops to pull carbon out of the air and out of the atmosphere. You know, they're becoming carbon sinks. Look, across the country, we set the first ever national conservation goal and protected more land and water than any other administration and record in our first year, because we can do it. And now the farmers are beginning to realize, if I put things in conservation, I get paid for putting cover crops down that absorb carbon. It makes sense to me. It keeps the land open, and it makes the environment much better. And they get paid for it, and they should get paid for it. It's their land. We're protecting natural wonders and cultural treasures, national monuments. I remember a little girl came up to me with her, I don't know how it happened, but I was walking outside, and a woman came up with a little girl and she said, "Mr. President, please protect Bears Ears." I said, "I beg your pardon, honey?" She said, "Please protect Bears Ears." I said, "Bears Ears?" She said, "Yes." And I knew what Bears Ears was because I've tried to take my kids to almost every national park. And I said, "Okay, honey." She said, "Promise me, promise me." And we did. Bears Ears, forests like the Tongass Forest. And by the way, we got some of the conservative Republicans to support it in their state. We got some support for it. And now we're working to restore the salmon runs here in the Northwest. Look, we're putting America on the cutting edge. We've approved the first commercial-scale offshore wind project in federal waters, which has already broken ground, with U.S. workers and U.S. Steel going to be building these facilities. By the way, I was up in Colorado and looking at the facilities we have there. You know, we now have windmills that the blades in those windmills 102 yards long. Hear me? 102 yards long. They can be placed way out in the ocean. And, you know, and by the way, I made it clear to my friends up in Nantucket in that area, I don't want to hear any more about you don't like looking at them. They're pretty. But seriously, it's incredible the breakthroughs that they're making. Once you tell a nation that we can do this, go do it, it's amazing what happens. It's amazing what happens. We've launched the first ever commercial flight powered by 100% sustainable aviation fuel. Lifted off with fuel grown here in America. Grown in America. We set the first net zero commitments for U.S. steel companies. And now we're rewarded for clean production through our first ever international carbon-based trade deal, which makes clean American steel cheaper to buy than dirty steel from other countries. And we're making it clear to the rest of the world that's what we're going to do. We put environmental justice at the center of what we do, addressing the disproportionate health, environmental, and economic impacts that have been borne primarily by communities of color, places too often left behind. I grew up when coal died in Scranton. We moved to Delaware. My dad had grown up. We moved to a little steel town called Claymont, Delaware, which is right at that arch that goes up into the Pennsylvania area there, and it's near a place called Marcus Hook, where there were more, at the time, more oil refineries then and Houston, because of 10 million people in that Delaware Valley up there. And when I went to a small little school that was about a mile from the apartment complex we lived in, and a little school called Holy Rosary. And you couldn't walk to school because although it was a 4-lane access highway, it was just too dangerous to cross some of the streets. And my mother would get in, and when it came spring, it came the fall, this is the God's truth. And you'd get in the car, there's a little frost on the window, turn on the windshield wiper, there'd be an oil slick. Not a joke. I have asthma, and 80% of the people who, in fact, we grew up with have asthma. That's what you call a fence line community. I understand what it's like. We only lived there. I went to school there for 12 years, but I didn't live there that whole time. My generic point is, you take a look, my state used to be, thank God it's no longer, had the highest cancer rate of any state in the nation because we have fence line communities going down Route 9, going down along the Delaware River, major facilities, oil plants and the like. And the people that get hurt are the people who live on the other side of those fences. I made a commitment. They're the people who are going to get helped as we move this. They're the people where the money's going to go to help their neighborhoods. And this bipartisan infrastructure law gives communities the money they need to get forever chemicals, PFAS, out of the water. They're deadly, deadly, and a lot of it's responsible because we, the government, and the military has engaged in activities that we didn't realize how it was dangerous over the years. But we're going to get rid of it all. We started replacing 100% of all the lead pipes and poison that poison our water in America. 400,000 schools and daycare centers. The kids can't turn on that water without getting worried about whether there's lead in that water. 10 million homes in America, and here in this city, in this state. Because every American, every child should be able to turn on a faucet and drink clean water, which will also create thousands of good-paying jobs for plumbers and pipe fitters and others. Look, all you got to do is look around. Cities and states are acting. Businesses are acting. I'm acting. We need Congress to act as well. And the people behind me are pushing Congress hard. They're pushing Congress hard. On to pass new investments and tax credits aimed directly at lowering costs for families. Look, you talk about, there's only 2 senators who occasionally don't vote with me. That's right? Literally, 48, they talk about the split in the Democratic Party. There's virtually no split in the Democratic Party. We just happen to have 50 presidents. You have 50 senators and 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans. I mean, anyone can change the dynamic, right? But all kidding aside, 48% of my Democratic colleagues in the Senate vote with me 94% of the time. So it's not like we have a split, but we have virtually no Republicans. There's some. We get up to as many as 7 or 8 will vote. This ain't your father's Republican Party. Not a joke. All you got to do is look what is being played this morning about the tape that was released. Anyway, but all kidding aside, this is a MAGA party now. It's, you got the senator from Texas and others. These guys are a different breed of cat. They're not like what I served with for so many years. And the people who know better are afraid to act correctly because they know they'll be primaried. I've had, I won't mention any of them, I promised I never would and I won't, but up to 6 come to me and say, Joe, I want to be with you on such and such, but I can't. I'll be primaried. I'll lose my race. So folks, this is going to start to change. Look, that bill that we talked about, that is the infrastructure bill, there were 2 pieces of it. It was one bill initially. And that bill had about $800 million in it for environmental related issues. Well, the one that didn't pass, the part that didn't pass yet, is one that has $531 million for environmental related issues. We got a lot done, though, in the bill that passed called the infrastructure bill that has to do with the environment, including tax credits for purchase of electric and fuel cell vehicles, new or used. What you're going to save a typical driver about $80 a month from not having to pay gas at the pump. Tax credits for folks to buy solar panels and heat pumps and more efficient windows, saving each an average of $500 a year to do this. Just making your home tighter so you don't leak the heat and leak the air conditioning you're going out. And my pen's ready. My pen's ready to sign. I'm anxious to sign these. Get some of these bills to my desk. And we can't forget. We can't forget that achieving our ambitious climate goals is going to require nature itself to play a role. If you compare the map of North America in 1620, and we have some of these maps, with America today, you'll see much of how much we've devastated our forest. I mean, it used to be, if you look from the Atlantic coast almost to the Mississippi River, was heavy forest. And we took it all down over those years. That's why today I'm signing an executive order to conserve our forests that do so much to protect us. Our forests are our planet's lungs. They literally are recycling and cycling CO2 out of the atmosphere. That's what they do. By the way, I spent time down in the Amazon and in Colombia and in Brazil. And guess what? More carbon is taken out of the air in the Amazon, that carbon sink, than every bit of carbon that is generated on a daily basis in the entire United States from every source. So what we should be doing, and I'm trying to get done, they're not going to maybe like this, we should be paying the Brazilians not to cut down their forest. We got to cut ours down. We got to cut ours down. We got the benefit of it. Because we've got these third world countries, not third world, some are, in Africa and in South America. We got to, the industrial countries have to help. Scientists estimate that the protection and restoration of our natural lands and waters can provide more than 1/3 of the solution to climate change. Just that, if we did nothing else. So today I'm about to sign an executive order to strengthen our forests on federal lands and make them and the local economies they support more resilient in the face of wildfires. I've flown over every major wildfire in this country with FEMA since, not every, a couple I didn't, but the vast majority of them. And it's devastating. I've seen it from helicopters with FEMA just flying over here, Idaho. I didn't get to go to Oregon, but California. It's absolutely devastating. So we're going to work with state and local and tribal governments to map, catalog, and then conserve old-growth forests on our public lands. These are the forests. We're going to do this. These are the forests that store, sequester incredible amounts of carbon and help us fight climate change. The forests that are home to majestic trees like the ones here in this park's magnificent forest. The executive order I'm going to sign is going to make good on the international forest protection commitments from the proposal I made in Scotland at Glasgow 26. I got 140 countries to sign up and say that together we represent 90% of the world's forests. And this includes our own effort to crack down on trafficking of illegal logged wood and products like the ones illegally deforesting areas around the world. In addition to that, I put in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we're going to plant 1.2 billion trees. 1.2 billion trees across this country to begin the vital work of reforesting America. It makes sense, and it also makes a big difference, including in our cities and on our city streets. The executive order also recognizes that when it comes to protecting our communities from floods and storms, nature can help us as well. For example, when it comes to stopping flooding, sometimes a wetland is more effective than a seawall. I live along a state where it's only average 3 feet above sea level, the state of Delaware, the Delaware River, the Delaware Bay, and the Atlantic Ocean. Well, you saw what happened, by the way, down in the Gulf. You saw what happened in Louisiana when they had that. It matters whether or not there's a wetlands. They're significantly more consequential than seawalls. In order to help bring more of those nature-based solutions into our planning, we have to move quickly. And with this executive order on Earth Day, we're also showing this moment of maximum threat and urgency can also be a moment of enormous hope and enormous opportunity. That we carry in heart and mind the image of the ideal place, the right place, the one true home, known or unknown, actually visionary. I know you all feel it. You wouldn't be sitting here in cold with your coats not on if you didn't. So I'm not going to sign this executive order, and I think we're going to make, I just think this is the beginning of a new day, and we're going to just have to overtake the opposition on this. I really mean it. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to sign this executive. Strengthening the nation's forest communities and local economies, and it's all about planting about 1.2 billion trees. So, and by the way, anybody bring the shovels? All right. Is this a state park or is this a city park?
City.
City park. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
On tribal land.
Let me give you.
Right here, right here.
It's right behind you.
Thank you.
There you go.
All right. Thank you.
And by the way, you notice who runs the Department of Interior now.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. So great. See you at the next event.
Well, yeah, but I tell you what, I'm excited about it.